Chapter 7:25. His fiery wings were burning fiercely on his back. A tall two-handed greatsword was also burning with holy fire. There was also a faint halo of light behind his back. Such an image could be likened to a god statue. He was more than 4 meters tall, but he didn't look fat. His body was fit and beautiful, and his huge body was covered in golden armor. His solemn face was filled with dignity and justice, and his sword-like eyebrows and big eyes were burning with hatred for evil. However, this angel was definitely no ceremonial soldier. His great sword, the great bow on his back, and the tower shield weren't just decorations. Such a rare creature was at the top of the food chain in both melee and long-range combat. A 6-winged battle angel was no different from a moving fortress. The second-ranked Scorching Sky God Envoy was in charge of judgment and punishment. According to what I knew, there were less than 100 of them in the entire world. They were all kept as honor guards by various gods, and they wouldn't be easily sent out. Why did this image seem so familiar? Or to use a more common term, he was the number 1 fighter below the gods, a scorching angel. Your Highness Roland, Lord Coloma wishes to meet with you. Please come with me. However, it wasn't the demons chasing after me. Instead, it was the Holy Church's angel squadron. His deep voice resonated with me. This was the natural holy voice of a high-level angel. Those with weak wills wouldn't be able to resist his natural charm. Of course, the scorching angel didn't expect me to be moved by his words. Although he was using the word invitation, his tone seemed to be filled with doubt and respect, as if it was only natural for me to do as I said. You're using such a method to invite me? It wasn't just a single scorching angel who came to me. There were a total of 11 4-winged mid-level angels floating in the sky. Some were armed with bows and arrows, while others were wielding staffs. They faintly surrounded me. Dragons used their body size to indicate their power level, while angels used their wings to indicate their power level. 2-winged low-level angels, 4-winged mid-level angels, and special-winged high-level angels. The angel squadrons that had previously entered the mortal plane had all been the lowest-level angels. Their individual power levels were all above gold rank. Meanwhile, 4-winged mid-level angels had at least saint rank combat strength. It was even possible for them to be semi-god rank. As for the superior angels, they were born with transcendent combat power. The most powerful of them were capable of clashing head-on with gods. They were truly a powerful race capable of playing an important role in divine wars. Seraphim were also famous for being able to fight among the superior angels, and each of the few Seraphim divine servants had their own title. Hynit? Vinton? My name is Vinton, the warhammer of my master's right arm. The rhythm of his speech was like a devout prayer. His voice naturally had a holy tone to it, but I couldn't hear any emotional fluctuations in his voice. The Hammer of Glory, Vinton Angola, was a god envoy directly under the god of holy light. Obviously, this was not a friendly invitation. Did Prince Winston and the Pope think that handing over the real murderer who killed Maria would end the civil war? No, in terms of holy light, the glorious hammer was probably even higher than the Pope. Had the god of holy light finally lost his patience? He wanted to use this opportunity to get rid of me as soon as possible. The angel's encirclement tightened slightly. Although the distance of a few steps was meaningless to us, they were using their actions to emphasize their presence. As long as I had any intention of escaping, they would immediately attack. Oh no, I have something urgent to do right now. Next time, halfway through his sentence, a spear of light suddenly appeared in front of me, indicating the angel's attitude. It would seem that there was no way to resolve this peacefully. However, I actually smiled happily. This wasn't a forced smile or a trick. It was a genuine delight from the bottom of my heart. Finally, I had obtained this opportunity. Did you know? What's the thing I hate the most in the world? Hating negative emotions like this isn't good. As a user of holy light, You should learn to control your own emotions. Vinton's voice was still calm, but it was as if he was a lecturer lecturing the truth. He was an emotionless angel looking down on mortals. In their culture, emotions were superfluous to begin with. As for me, the first thing I hate is idiots who think they're better than others. My favorite thing to do is to break their arrogant noses. The second thing I hate are idiots who have no opinions of their own and only know how to blindly follow others. Scamming and toying with them makes me truly happy. The third thing I hate are all sorts of birdmen. Just looking at them makes me itch all over. It's quite rare to see all three of you together. My words didn't contain much emotion. My deepest hatred didn't need to be shouted out. I simply wanted to remember him, find an opportunity, and then kill him. On the Ottoman plains, an angel army slaughtered true devout believers of the holy light. Estrada's followers were crushed by the angel army, and even Estrada died there. A holy knight and holy light priest who worshipped the holy light had actually died at the hands of an angel army sent by the god of holy light who worshipped the holy light. How ridiculous and tragic was this! Yes, I knew that the angels were nothing more than the god of holy light's tools. They were nothing more than slaughter puppets with no will of their own. But since that was the case, I might as well use these puppets to collect some interest. Since a sword with a soul was being commanded by its master to kill on its own, then breaking the sword wouldn't count as a mistake, would it? My death magic domain expanded as dark magic spread out. The original sin demon god incarnation that I hadn't used for a long time was activated. The power of holy light was basically a buff to angels. My half-baked power of ice was limited in damage to angels, and my power of law was basically useless against the sinless. My skin began to distort. My scales and magic wings were both symbols of demons. The next instant, the angel army unhesitatingly started attacking since they had already received the order to directly kill Estrada if they couldn't capture him. I laughed as my death shadow began dancing its own dance. Despair, 7 sins of creation sword. Countless wailing black shadows gradually appeared in my shadow. These were the despairing souls that I had collected from the demon wave. The black shadows transformed into living humans. A hole opened up in the world as black humanoid figures that resembled black mud poured out from within. Perhaps this magic sword was the least complete of all the 7 sins of creation sword, but it was definitely the most powerful. This was especially true against the various gods and creatures from the heavens. If Dawn's holy light sword's enemies were demons and undead, then this 7 sins of creation sword's natural enemies would be the order gods and angels. The soul had always been the main theme of my death magic. Meanwhile, emotions were the key to unlocking the secrets of the soul. The entire sky was polluted. White clouds turned into dark clouds, and the wind carried a pungent smell. The fertile soil was instantly dyed black and rotted. The ordinary land became a plain of death. And this was only the aftermath of this magic sword's concept being taken out. Chapter 726. What is a soul? Everyone had their own opinions, but none of them were close to the truth. This was because there was no standard answer to this question from the very beginning. The goddess of creation did not have a blueprint from the beginning. It was a self-evolution of the soul. It was just that the researchers analyzed it from different angles. In the east of Earth, there was a saying that there were 3 souls and 7 spirit. The 3 souls of heaven, earth, and human, carried completely different functions. They were the human's self-awareness, human's sense of propriety, justice and shame, and human's lifespan. According to my understanding, self-awareness, values, and the lifespan of the soul are the basic hardware that makes up a soul. Under certain conditions, these are also fixed. The 7 spirits were the dead dog, the crouching arrow, the sparrow, the thief, the non-poison, the defilement, and the smelly lung, which referred to happiness, anger, sorrow, fear, love, evil, and desire. In other words, they referred to the most primitive emotions and instincts. Don't you find it familiar? Actually, the 7 deadly sins of the West are the same. At most, there are some differences in the specific emotions. It's just that the angle of differentiation is slightly different. When it came to human nature, no one was better than the other. It was just that, in another sense, different paths led to the same destination. The starting point of my research was the foundational structure of the soul. The division between hardware and software was the foundation of everything. The 3 spiritual souls were hardware that were fixed in a short period of time. However, the 7 physical souls were the embodiment of a person's emotions. They were changeable and forever changing. One second they could be extremely happy, but the next second they could burst into tears. In my opinion, whether or not an AI had feelings was the most fundamental difference between humans and non-humans. No matter how fast an AI's calculations were, it wasn't a living thing. The so-called random calculations were just a trick to deceive people. It would never be able to compare to feelings that came from the heart. In the scientific world, the study of the soul could only rely on guesses, but in He there were traces to follow. That key was the emotions represented by the 7 spirit. The art of fear, which made people scream in fear, was the favorite of necromancers. It was a special use of negative energy. There were many divine spells that made people happy and calm. Holy light instinctively made people feel warm and at ease. Rage, berserk energy, the soul of rage burning in the blood, the berserker had the ability to tear everything apart. Charm and aphrodisiac abilities were the favorites of certain classes and succubi from the lower planes. Some of these abilities were strong, some were weak, some were rare, and some were commonplace, but they all touched upon the depths of the soul, the black box that no one could reach, the part that represented the 7 souls and 7 deadly sins. Injecting a certain frequency of magic power or certain energy would trigger a certain emotional reaction. Perhaps, from a certain perspective, the human soul was also an interesting thing like computer programming. Thus, after a long period of research, I gradually analyzed the soul fluctuations represented by the various emotions. How does the power of transcendence affect the soul? How to adjust the supernatural power? How to increase/decrease the influence? Which part of the soul are they affecting? Which part of the 3 souls and 7 spirit? Could he split a part of his emotions? Was that the legendary soul detachment syndrome? The result of my research was that I divided a normal soul into many pieces and successfully separated the areas of pure emotions, artificially creating the purest and most single-minded stubborn soul. Yes, the 7 deadly sins. Of course, it wasn't that simple. The birth of every single soul of original sin required at least 1,000 times the amount of soul essence. This included a portion of my own soul essence. The power of the 7 deadly sins lay in the uniqueness of the soul, the purity of the soul, and the extremity of the soul. Only those who loved would be saints. Only those who hated would go insane. Only those who desired would be incurable. Any soul that reached the extremity would be impossible to be ordinary. In terms of quality, the souls of every single soul of the 7 deadly sins were at least 1,000 times more powerful than that of an ordinary mortal. And in terms of soul quality, there was no foundational difference between a semi-god and a normal mortal. And for He, the soul was the source of his power. 4 undead creatures, as long as their physical bodies weren't too weak, they wouldn't possibly be weak. And this is only a part of the results of my research, the knowledge of soul creation. In that case, doctors who were the best at saving lives would naturally know how to kill faster. With creation came destruction. Mastering the essence of creating souls would naturally mean mastering how to completely destroy a soul. 7 sins of creation soared. Countless vengeful souls crawled out of my shadow, forcefully transforming the entire plains into a living hell. I was able to take away a portion of a soul. In that case, what would happen if I added a portion to an originally healthy soul? What would happen if I added one of the 3 spiritual souls and 7 physical souls? From a certain standpoint, this was indeed an interesting proposition. And so, I did some interesting experiments. Boom! The four-winged angel that the vengeful souls collided with instantly exploded into blood and minced meat. There were no magic waves, no battle, no sound. A powerful angel that had lived for nearly 1,000 years was gone just like that. Beside me, countless resentful souls walked out. Some of them died of despair, some of them died of hunger, some of them died of lust, some of them died of anger, and after I processed them, those pure emotions became all of them. They were all souls of pure original sin. They instinctively desired to be complete. They instinctively desired to return to the cycle of reincarnation and instinctively became a part of another soul. This wasn't an attack. This was a blessing. This was the soul's instinct. They were just like soul shards in the river Styx. They were currently merging together and becoming more complete. When I raised my head and laughed out loud, countless dark souls spilled out from under my feet. The entire world became a haunted house. The powerful battle angels weren't even worth mentioning in front of these weak, vengeful souls. The moment they came into contact with them, they would either be as unmoving as a mountain with their physical bodies intact but their souls destroyed. Alternatively, their souls and physical bodies would both become distorted and instantly explode. If the river Styx was the acid that could dissolve all souls, then these simple souls would be the glue for souls. Attack these vengeful souls? They weren't even undead. They were pure living beings. Holy light should give souls peace and blessing. How was I supposed to attack them? Demon! In the sky, the roaring seraphim swung his sword down. His lightning-like sword intent was tearing through space itself. I was unable to dodge at all. But why should I dodge? The burning holy light sword was already touching my face. The glorious hammer, Vinton Angola, had an expression of disbelief as he stopped. Countless vengeful souls crawled out of his body. Veins popped up on his furious face. It would seem that even angels now had emotions. How does it feel to have your soul restored? It must be nice to experience anger and despair for the first time, right? You should be thanking me for allowing a toy like you to have emotions, right? It was a pity that my words were meaningless. The seraphim couldn't hear me anymore. The God-killing battle angel was still in the same posture as when he swung his sword to slay demons. However, he was no longer able to move, because the soul within him had been completely destroyed. I picked up my cloak and activated my shadow again. This time, I began collecting these vengeful souls. These were all materials for my sword. I had gathered them with great difficulty, so I couldn't waste them. Sigh, what a waste! On one hand, I sighed at the waste of these simple souls. These 3 minutes of explosive power had wasted more than 20,000 vengeful souls. On the other hand, it was a pity that all the angel souls had been destroyed. I was unable to retrieve such high-quality souls. I resumed my journey. This time, only a few god statues of angels remained behind me. Perhaps they would stand here for a very long time. 3 days later, the calamity rankings were updated. For the first time, a certain person entered the top 3. This time, his titles weren't some ambiguous, undying Roland. Instead, he was titled Soul Dominator and Undead Emperor. Chapter 727. The tigers on the mountain haven't eaten humans for a long time, and you think it's time for you to become vegetarians? Young man, this old dog still has some teeth. Being ambushed and killed by the Holy Church was within my expectations. As long as the Holy Church was powerful, and as long as their superior god-level combat strength could enter the world, it would be only natural for them to eliminate an unstable factor like me. In that case, I would either find a hole to hide in, or I would cut off the filthy hands that reached over and tell them to act within their means. You want to kill me? Sure, as long as you pay a sufficient price. My 7 evils magic sword should be able to calm down these ordinary order gods for a period of time. So far, apart from the blade of law which was still in the blueprint stage, The design concepts and functions of my magic swords had all been revealed. I had also decided on my own combat style. The very first would be the Ice Magic Sword Northland. It would create a death arena where only enemies and I would fight in a restricted area in the snow, which I was most skilled at. And within the restricted area, the Dawn Holy Sword would be effective. Not only would it increase my combat strength, but it would also continuously weaken chaos creatures. It would be as shameless as tying vampires to the sun. And if the opponent was undead or demons, the Dawn Holy Sword would also have powerful killing abilities. But just this alone wouldn't be enough. Holy swords were meaningless to the Order gods, angels, mortals, and other creatures of Order. However, I still chose to create them. That was because in my design concepts, there was a powerful killing weapon that only had souls and could easily slay even gods, the Seven Evils Magic Sword. The 7 evils of the 7 evils magic sword were the 7 major negative emotions that humans viewed as the original sins. This was proof that the higher planes viewed the lower planes as imperfect creatures. The god of holy light, who had already transformed into an automaton, and the angels, who were pure killing machines, were the most extreme in this aspect. Since you view the negative emotions of mortals as sins, then this sword made purely of the negative emotions of mortal souls should be called the 7 Evils Magic Sword. There was no need to explain the theory behind this sword. It was made from a tremendous number of souls. According to my calculations and basic design, it probably didn't need several tens of thousands of souls, but millions or even tens of millions of souls. Not only that, the more pitiful the death and the deeper the souls were, the better the effects would be. No matter how one looked at it, even in the entire history of necromancy, this magic sword could be considered as the most evil creation. Once the molding was successful, anyone who was hit, as long as it had a soul, would be instantly destroyed by the massive amount of negative emotions. A body without a soul would be meaningless. The design concept has already been proven to be feasible. The only thing I've been complaining about is the lack of materials. Ever since I created the blueprints for the Chaos Abyss, I had been complaining about my lack of materials. I had even considered going to the undead planes to rob them. Unfortunately, undead that had lived for far too long didn't have that many negative emotions. The souls of the living that had just died were still the most useful. If I was forced into a corner, I even had the thought of looking for the inventor of necromancy, the demon archduke. If it wasn't for the matter with the elves, I might have already succeeded. I searched everywhere, but was unable to find all of them. In fact, I couldn't even find a fraction of them. However, the Battle of the Elves gave me an unexpected harvest. From a certain standpoint, I had personally benefited the most from the elves' destruction. I had destroyed the demon wave with a single forbidden spell on the battlefield. Even I didn't know how many souls I had managed to collect in the end. Not only that, the soul shards of the elven gods, especially the soul flower that a main god had shattered at the very last moment, were all precious treasures that would be impossible to collect under normal circumstances. The soul shards of these god-level existences not only greatly improved the quality of the materials, but the elven gods' curses and grudges before their deaths also accidentally infected my magic sword with the curse of godfall, giving it additional offensive power against the god. This made me decide to begin molding my magic sword. The core of my magic sword, 7 Evils, was the soul shard of the elf main god Anslo. The process of molding my magic sword was slowly progressing in the shadows. I didn't take out my 7 Evils sword, which was still in the process of being molded, when faced with the attack of the angel army. I simply opened up the opening where my magic sword was stored, allowing the materials to come out by themselves. If I had really taken out my magic sword, which was still in the process of being molded, then we could take a look at what happened to the small countries that revealed that they were researching nuclear weapons, as well as what the status of the main gods would be after they invented nuclear weapons. The effect is even better than I expected. In a way, this was also a test. Pure creatures of order would obey the heavens' orders. They would be emotionless and emotionless as their honor and virtue. Their souls would also be quite special, exquisite, and balanced. Just a few powerful negative souls were already enough to make them unable to withstand it. That seraphim could be considered a main god in the upper planes, but even he wasn't able to last for long. And the seraphim wasn't even the true enemy of this magic sword. That's right, it was likely that some people had already guessed that this magic sword's true enemy was the Order Gods. The Order Gods were combined with their own divine concept. From a certain standpoint, they were existences without any sense of self. They would need to fulfill their divine concepts and expand their own concepts. The concepts represented by divine concepts would greatly increase, and the gods would become even more powerful. For example, the god of war during war, the god of wisdom during the Renaissance, the god of rain or the god of the sea during a downpour. Their divine kingdoms would be their own domains. Their divine bodies would be the combination of their souls and divine concept. They would be concepts with their own consciousness, and if too much of their self was poured into them, they would probably die in a worse way than seraphim. Theoretically speaking, if their divine bodies were struck by this magic sword, their originally ordered divine bodies would naturally be filled with many impurities, which would cause them to lose their internal balance. The gods didn't have individual souls, so the destruction of their entire divine body would be an unsalvageable destruction. The god-slaying sword Seven Evils was the true name of this magic sword that I still couldn't say out loud. As for when it would take form, that would depend on when enough people died. Perhaps I should go sightseeing on the battlefield more often. The Golden Dawn holy sword purified chaos into order. It was the slayer of demons and undead, the purifier of chaos. The black magic sword Seven Evils poured chaos into order. It was the slayer of angels and gods, the destroyer of order. Theoretically speaking, as long as I completed these two magic swords, I wouldn't be at too much of a disadvantage against any opponent. Unfortunately, no matter which magic sword it was, it would be far too difficult to deal with. Perhaps I should go to the battlefield when I have the time. The death of the Hammer of Glory, Vintanangola, caused a huge uproar in the entire world. The Holy Church, which had originally been in high morale with the arrival of reinforcements, instantly went silent as if someone had hit them with a club. This was understandable. Vintanangola was a legendary character from the legends, the god of holy light's right-hand angel. Every day, people would hear about how powerful he was, how he eliminated evil, and how he killed powerful magical beasts. Everyone wanted nothing more than to accomplish those legendary feats together with him. However, this undefeatable god of war had mysteriously died in a small alley right after arriving. Not only that, he had been killed while trying to kill someone else, and his opponent wasn't even a god. Not only was this unacceptable, but it also made people wonder if they had been scammed before. Perhaps their backer wasn't as strong as they had expected. Even someone who had been bragged about as an undefeatable god of war was so weak. Perhaps it was time for them to consider a path of retreat. The cardinals of the Holy Church were no idiot. They did their best to keep this information under wrap. Unfortunately, others weren't idiots either. They wouldn't let go of such a good opportunity to damage the Holy Church's reputation, especially the fairies, who were becoming increasingly dissatisfied with the Holy Church. On the afternoon of the second day after Vintanangola's death, posters that were printed at the last minute were everywhere. Based on the fairies' style, although the titles Vintanangola, who felt that he had a great advantage, was killed by a mortal and tragedy. Someone announced that he loved to eat roasted angel wings, were as eye-catching as ever. The content of the posters was as detailed and realistic as ever. How the angel army blocked Roland's path, how the angels felt that they had a great advantage, and then swarmed him, only to instantly kill him was described in a very realistic manner. In fact, even the time it took for the battle to end was recorded. The title of 3-Second Man would probably make the venerable Vinton Angola so angry that he would come back to life. Of course, there were also illustrations of the battle. Vinton Angola, who seemed as strong and powerful as a mythical hero, stood next to those piles of flesh. However, his eyes were empty, and his powerful physical body had become nothing more than an empty shell. How did Roland accomplish this? How did he succeed with such an attack method? If Vinton Angola came to assassinate a certain politician, would that person be able to escape? What sort of attack method could destroy an enemy without harming the physical body? Not to mention, the enemy was an angel, a powerful species with the highest magic resistance in the entire world. Of course, Roland wouldn't give an explanation. Only an idiot would do something so foolish as to show off his special abilities so that others could find flaws in them. When this battle report was tossed onto the desks of every country's politician and king, only then did everyone recall that Roland Mist was not only a major arms dealer and diplomat who was skilled at international negotiations and private deals. He had even challenged the entire world by himself and almost defeated a mega-dangerous individual. And then, the calamity rankings were updated, and Roland was now ranked third on the list. The person ranked second was an old acquaintance of mine, Chaos War God Donati's. During the Demon Wave, countless individuals had died directly or indirectly to Donati's. And the person ranked first on the calamity rankings was still that existence whose name shouldn't even be mentioned, by the way. If Donati's was even more dangerous than a Chaos main god, he must have long since been undefeatable. It was likely that before news of him leaving the world of He spread, his number one position on the calamity rankings wouldn't change. As for me, after the news spread out, the people around me became much cleaner. At the very least, any faction or organization that had any intentions of attacking me would now measure their own resources and see if they could truly deal with me, and if they could afford to take my revenge. And, if I wanted to express goodwill to other factions in the future, it would have much more weight. This was just how realistic the world was. No matter how famous one was or how amazing one's past was, it wouldn't compare to having actual combat achievements right in front of one's eyes. Perhaps many people felt that, after my revival, I was actually much weaker than I was in my Lich form. It was likely that all their previous information analysis was now useless. Another benefit was that I no longer had to hide my whereabouts. I could openly enter cities, stay in inns, or go to restaurants. Nobody would stop me. Even the Holy Church, which was involved in all this, fell into an abnormal silence. Perhaps they never expected that even though they had sent out their ace, they would be completely annihilated without even causing a ripple. Unless they sent out the true body of a mid or powerful god, I really wouldn't be afraid of them. It was just that I felt rather pained to lose the materials for my magic swords. But since I had already revealed my true identity as the Undead Emperor, I no longer avoided anything. I directly traveled through the battlefields of the Holy Church's internal war, driving my ghost carriage through the battlefields and taking away the pitiful souls who died due to the internal war. It wasn't that no level 4 individuals noticed me, but since I had no intention of interfering with the battle, most of them pretended that they didn't see anything. Perhaps my reputation was somewhat tarnished, but I regretted not being able to see anything. Now that I no longer needed to completely abandon my disguise and hide from people, I could even travel through battlefields of my own volition, which greatly increased my speed. In less than a week, I took the opportunity to arrive at the AMU Mountains. However, this place was different from the previous internal war. The two sides fighting here were demons, ogres, and humans. It would be far too difficult for anyone to pretend that they didn't see me. This time, I should be able to make a mistake. After eliminating all the wrong targets, of course I would be able to find the correct target. Although my luck in the lottery was rather frustrating, at the very least, I had obtained the final material for my magic sword. It was now before me for me to truly become a level 4 individual. Chapter 728. In this pitch-black cave, apart from the sound of water dripping, there was only the sound of footsteps. Asterisk swoosh. Asterisk the addition of alchemical accelerant caused the torch's light to become even brighter, allowing me to clearly see the decorations around me. The crude cave obviously wasn't the official entrance. It was a vast area as far as the eye could see. The rock wall above me was more than 100 meters tall, and a series of gray palaces stretched as far as I could see. Gray brick stairs formed a path between the palaces. Under the palace complex there were small brick bungalows, but now all that was left of them were broken brick walls. This place should have once been the ruins of some civilization, but it was obvious that it had been robbed more than once. Apart from the stone statues that couldn't be moved, the robbers didn't leave anything behind. The golden skin and gems on the statues had all been dug out. Perhaps it was because the craftsmanship wasn't good enough, or perhaps it was too ancient, but the murals on the walls were all gray and black. Even the parchment scrolls were so rotten that they were unrecognizable. Did I miss again? The silly cat's words caused my heart to tighten. If I really did encounter a target that was stolen by a robber, then it would truly be like searching for a needle in a haystack. Let's ask the gatekeeper first. Skeletons walked out from the ruins. Most of them were dressed like grave robbers, but there were also some skeletons with bird heads. Undead. I actually heaved a sigh of relief when I saw the enemy. The most common type of undead in ruins and ruins were all sorts of undead. As far as I could see, most of the undead here were skeleton type. There were low-level skeleton soldiers, commoner version, skeleton archers and skeleton laborers. However, the highest-level undead here were probably only a few skeleton mages. There were no liches here. The existence of these undead here meant that this ruin hadn't been repeatedly cleaned out yet. There should still be valuable items here. Even if there were high-level undead here, they wouldn't be intelligent existences. After all, even the solitary liches would occasionally want to go out for a stroll. It would be acceptable for them to stay underground for several hundred years, but several thousand years or tens of thousands of years would be too much. Many people believed that the older the undead were, the stronger they would be. In a way, this was a misconception. Generally speaking, the more intelligent the undead were, the less likely they were to be weak. Tisk, they're already eroded. Don't break them too much before I extract their memories. The negative energy of the skeleton soldiers in front of him was starting to dissipate. Their bones were about to turn into fossils. Some of them even fell apart on their own as they walked. What kind of combat strength did they have left? It wasn't that the longer the undead lived, the stronger they would become. It was that only the powerful undead could live for so long. Low-level unintelligent undead that had been alone for a long time would gradually weaken as their negative energy dissipated, and they might even return to dust. If the negative energy density in that area was very high, it was also possible for a new undead to appear in a pile of corpses and broken bones, which was completely different from a natural undead. Only the intelligent undead would consciously gather more negative energy, gradually becoming stronger, more cunning, and more solitary. The skeletal creatures in front of them gave off the feeling that a gust of wind would blow them to the ground. Perhaps the enclosed environment here gave them enough protection. These undead guards could bully grave robbers who didn't have much power, but they were useless against a necromancer like me. A few low-level enslaved undead went down and seized control of these masterless undead. I directly extracted the memories from the skeleton soldier's soul fragments, but I furrowed my eyebrows. The oldest undead here are less than 1,000 years old. They crawled out from the remains of this place. At the time, this place was already in ruins. Later, the Earth's crust shifted, making it even harder to find the entrance. There aren't any treasures here, so nobody ever comes here. I would rather have an undead bone dragon block my way than encounter such a situation. If I searched bit by bit, who knew how long it would take? It was even possible that I wouldn't find anything in the end. I was even more unwilling to just turn around and leave like this. I smell the scent of the living. Who dares to disturb the glorious Grimcard's slumber? I suddenly heard an angry roar from the palace. This was a secret conversation between souls, something only high-level undead were capable of. Judging from the mana fluctuations and the dragon's tone, it seemed to be a bone dragon? Soon, a ghost dragon flew out from the palace. Although it was only a small dragon that was less than 5 meters long, its voice reached me before it even arrived. So the jinx is still useful. 2 minutes later, the ghost dragon that had been baring its fangs and claws earlier was now clutching its head and lying on the ground. At my friendly request, it enthusiastically explained the situation around it to me. Mirror? Something that shines? Something that can reflect the light of other objects? This small ghost dragon didn't even seem to know what a mirror was. However, with my enthusiastic help, it soon recalled something. I think I saw it a long time ago, but I couldn't bite it, so I casually threw it away. I don't know where it is now, but it should be here. I couldn't even be bothered to get angry at the ghost dragon's foolish expression. It would be quite difficult to extract memories that even the ghost dragon couldn't remember. I had no intention of slowly searching through several hundred years of this ghost dragon's memories. In that case, this dragon is still useful. At the very least, it means that it's sturdy enough and doesn't fear torture. In that case, all of you, get moving. Find it even if you have to dig 3 feet underground. One skeleton soldier after another stood up from the ground and picked up their hoes, knives, and forks as they began their treasure hunt. I was worried that we wouldn't have enough people, so I even summoned an additional group of undead to help with the search. As a veteran tomb robber, adventurer, it wasn't like I hadn't experienced exploring ruins before. Treasures wouldn't be placed in treasure chests for you to open like in games, nor would they naturally drop when you killed some monster. Judging from the intense magical waves, it was obvious that these treasures were good items. They were most likely cursed items or trap. Nobody would casually bring their entire treasure trove around. Even monsters with low intelligence would have plenty of disguises and traps in their treasure trove. Without a good eye for appraising treasures, even a valuable antique would be treated as scrap metal. I had already seen a dozen amateurs who would treat shiny, gold-plated swords as if they were treasures. In those legendary stories, the lucky ones who picked up god equipment from grocery stores were usually idiots who treated the god equipment as scrap metal and sold it off. Although this was 99% likely to be a scam used by unscrupulous merchants to scam newcomers, there were indeed a few precedent. After all, not every adventurer's team would bring along a veteran appraiser. Some goods were obtained through illegal means, especially when it came to tomb robbers who robbed nobles' tombs. They would be satisfied if they could get their goods out safely. It was quite common for them to sell their goods at a low price. In that case, you've picked up leftovers before? Bought something good at a low price? The silly cat was rather astonished. No, I've seen others pick up leftovers before. For example, Cavendish, Adam, I felt more and more that the world was unfair. Why was it that these low-intelligence creatures always succeeded in picking up leftovers? Even though I repeatedly appraised and inspected items, I never found any treasure, so that's why I opened my own shop in Sulphur Mountain City, specializing in selling unappraised stolen goods and antiques picked up from underground tombs. I sold them for 500 silver coins each. At first, business was quite good. You're still able to maintain a long-term supply of those random items? You must have arranged for someone to win them, right? My antique craftsmanship was quite good, and I also had all the random items my system gave me. Heloise shook her head. She had also guessed what had happened after that. You were exposed later, so you couldn't continue your business? No, although I indeed couldn't continue my business afterwards, that wasn't the reason. Then what was it? You felt that it was boring? I was careless and made a mistake. I really sold a god equipment for 500 silver coins. I lost so much that I cried, so I couldn't continue my business anymore. With your personality, you actually couldn't think of a way to get it back? Oh, I get it. Don't tell me that the one who bought it was Adam? I nodded heavily. This incident had left a shadow in my heart. I had lost at least 10 years' worth of business. I would never open my shop again. I chatted with Heloise from time to pass the time. The low-level undead were helping me search for the mirror, but I really didn't know how long it would take for them to find it. Reflective shards, hard stones. These were the crude orders I gave these low-level undead. They were so complex that they couldn't understand them. Some skeleton soldiers were already holding strangely shaped stones in front of me. It would seem that I would have to look for them for a long time. 1 year? Half a year? But the god of luck actually favored me just once. After the broken stones piled up into a small mountain in front of me, a skeleton worker who was almost rotting brought me the magic mirror in less than a week. Chapter 729. What about the sun god's magic mirror? As a former top-level god equipment, it didn't really matter to me whether or not it had many wondrous uses. That was because it was only one piece of the puzzle. What I needed was its material and effects. The main material for my Dawn Holy Light sword was based on my design. Apart from all the random supplementary materials, the most important material was one main material and 2 functional components. The quality of their materials would directly affect the final power level of my sword. Back in the Chaos Abyss, when the Devil Lords were constantly pressuring me, I forcefully created this sword. The main materials I chose were Roland's spear and Estrada's battle hammer, which the god of holy light had used when he was still an ordinary person. Dawn was a holy equipment that represented the day of holy light's descent. It represented the origin of holy light, and had the highest level of symbolism in a religion. That was why Dawn was the highest level holy light equipment. The latter was a holy knight's inheritance. It was the symbol of the holy light's protection for humanity for thousands of years. As the main material, this Dawn Holy Light sword had an unbreakable tenacity. It had the most important tenacity and hardness of any weapon. Also, it was the best combination for holy light. Not just one main material was good enough. Myth-ranked weapons were usually made from rare treasures or special items. The design didn't have any specific requirements on the material to begin with. There were only requirements on the material's abilities. It would be fine as long as the design's functionality was met. As for the last 2 functional components, one was used to scatter light and purify pure holy light, just like a lighthouse. The other was used to gather light and use highly focused holy light to kill enemies, just like a laser. Originally, I had intended to use these 2 components to complete these 2 functions. However, Sun God Aloyo gave me a great gift. The concept of the sun itself was a light source that scattered light. Meanwhile, a mirror was a magician of light. Depending on the shape, design, and angle, a mirror would either gather or scatter light. When the 2 met, my 2 functional needs were satisfied at the same time. My Dawn Holy Light sword disintegrated in midair. Aloyo's mirror transformed into liquid mercury and merged with my Dawn Holy Light sword. While creating the sword, I sat down cross-legged and meditated. Holy light shone down from my Dawn Holy Light sword. I bathed in holy light. Stepping into the demigod stage wasn't just a matter of crafting an epic weapon. Creating a myth-ranked weapon was only a method. The powerful characteristics and combat strength were only secondary. His true goal was to use a myth-ranked weapon as an extension and supplement for his physical body, making up for the natural deficiencies of humans, elves, and other humanoid creatures. Humans were like a cup. The path of growth would be filled with water. By the time one reached the myth rank, the cup would already be full. The limitations of one's race would limit one's development. In that case, one would either have to change to a larger vessel, which would be equivalent to changing one's race and physical body. This would be equivalent to starting all over again. Alternatively, a small opening would be made on the side of the cup, allowing the water to flow out and be stored in a backup container. This was the foundational theory for myth-ranked weapons to achieve breakthroughs. The Great Tao was the simplest. It sounded easy, but it was harder than ascending to the heavens. This is equivalent to making up for your innate defect. That new myth-ranked weapon would need to be a part of you. That way you wouldn't waste the buff. Also, you couldn't take too small of a step. Otherwise, it wouldn't be effective and it would be meaningless. This was the equivalent of having an additional functional organ grow out of a human's physical body. Using this as an opportunity, you broke through the limits that the Creator Goddess had set for you. This was also the origin of the names Semi-God and Level Surpassers. Once you took this step, you would no longer be an ordinary person. You would surpass your limits and become undying. That's right, Semi-God's lifespan would be greatly increased. Even if you didn't make any preparations to extend your lifespan would still be increased by several times. As long as you weren't in a hurry to die, you wouldn't need to worry about your lifespan. However, in order to develop a new path, just strengthening your myth-ranked weapon wouldn't be enough. During this process, your physical body would also need to evolve and change in order to adapt to the new organ. Only then would you be able to evolve both your physical body and your myth-ranked weapon. It could be said that this step was the most important step, as well as the most difficult step. How well you took this step would directly affect your future development limit. Some people would waste several hundred years at the myth rank in order to take the final step well. In the end, either you didn't have enough resources, or there was a problem with your design, so you were still barely able to take the final step. Some people wouldn't even reach the myth rank for several hundred years before breaking through to the myth rank and achieving amazing results. Some people would bitterly struggle for several hundred years before finally breaking through to the myth rank and achieving limitless potential. Some people would lose the possibility of reaching the heavens from the very start due to their past flaws and detours. The most pitiful of all would be the tremendous difference between an undead emperor and a myth-ranked undead emperor. However, the great majority of so-called level surpassers would only barely be able to reach the myth rank. They would be satisfied if they could reach the myth rank. It would be far too extravagant to begin with. Every myth-ranked weapon would be different. Everyone's path to becoming a level surpasser would be different as well. In that case, everyone's future paths would naturally be different as well. Before becoming a level surpasser, one could still rely on the experiences of their predecessors. They could also slowly imitate their predecessors' experiences. The path after becoming a level surpasser would be as wide as the ocean. There would be no guidance from seniors, nor would there be any restrictions from past experiences. There would be no restrictions at all. Being able to reach such a level would depend entirely on one's own abilities. Holy light formed a cycle between me and my holy light sword. A mysterious change was currently occurring. I felt an itch on my back. Suddenly, a pair of golden wings appeared on my back without any restrictions. Even though I hadn't transformed into a war angel yet, these wings had appeared on their own. Damn it, am I going to transform into a birdman? I was surprised, but my system gave me a timely message that helped me calm down. It turned out that from the very start, the so-called War Angel transformation / original Sin Demon transformation had only been a part of my physical body's bloodline, just like how an angel's bloodline would come with wings. However, the power of my Arbiter bloodline was far too powerful. My physical body, which was far too weak, wasn't able to withstand it. My system had helped me separate my bloodline and turned it into a temporary transformation for me to use. But now that I had become a level surpasser, my bloodline power had stabilized. Naturally, I would need to return it to my physical body. I won't transform into a birdman, will I? However, I still had my doubts. I wouldn't be able to accept it if I really became a birdman. Do you really hate my angel creation so much? Relax, it's just like how a tiger won't reveal its claws for no reason. It's possible to hide all of your angel characteristics. It's just that you'll be able to obtain the additional power from transforming into an angel, and your physical appearance will change slightly. I heaved a sigh of relief when I heard that I wouldn't become a birdman, so I got rid of my resistance and allowed these changes to happen automatically. As holy light continuously flowed down my body, the originally hidden power of my bloodline was completely activated. Warmth flowed through my limbs and body, and I felt like my entire body was filled with endless power, yet I was unable to move. The power of my bloodline that came with my transformation ability was being broken down as a tremendous amount of order power was truly transforming my physical body. Angels were the most favored creatures of order by the goddess of order. The power of order that far surpassed that of seraphim allowed my physical body to become purer and purer. My arms were visibly becoming thicker, while the rocks under my feet were becoming smaller. There was only one possible explanation for such an abnormal transformation: my physical body was growing. Actually, even if you don't eat those fruits, you'll still be able to reach adulthood by now. Only now did I discover that this was probably a gift that my system had prepared long ago. However, it would only open up after I reached my current power level. The result of the foundational power of order entering my physical body was that my vessel was foundationally improving the quality of my physical body, establishing the best foundation for my future development. However, that wasn't what I was worried about. I won't become even bigger than a seraphim, will I? When I thought about how a high-level battle angel's true body would be even more ridiculous than a giant's, I trembled even more. I didn't want to be like Little Red, needing to use transformation magic to walk around in the mortal world. Stop wasting my breath. Don't worry about me. At the very least, my sense of beauty is better than Cynthia's. A bizarrely shaped demon flashed past my eyes, along with a rotten flesh incarnation. Stronger than Cynthia, this was truly a low standard. But soon, I didn't have the time to chat. I had reached a critical moment in my power level advancement. Now I could only wait for the result. Judging from the holy light sword that was currently taking shape in the sky, the next time I woke up would be when I took that final step. Chapter 730. The white sword of light sliced through the air, leaving behind a trail of light and the smell of something being burned. The light swords danced in the air, and the afterimages filled the entire space. After destroying the ruins in front of me into rubble and leveling the rubble, I put away the bladeless sacred sword in my sleeve in satisfaction. That's right, my sleeve was more than enough to act as a scabbard. This sword truly only has a hilt? I nodded in confirmation at the silly cat's question. Previously, this sword didn't have a blade, not because it wasn't complete enough. It was because the design didn't have a blade to begin with. This was a sword of light that transcended time. May the Force be with you. May the holy light be with you. The God of holy light is protecting you. Devout holy light believers made a gesture of prayer. Unfortunately, there were no comments, no praises, no appreciators. I refocused my attention on the sacred sword. The hilt was less than 30 centimeters long and was milky white like white jade. It felt warm to the touch, and there was an opening where the blade should have been. That was the opening for the blade of light. There were no unnecessary decorations, nor were there any tacky gems. The only decoration was a pattern of thorns and dragon scales, as well as a functional part to prevent the sword from slipping. As I willed it, holy light gathered on the hilt, forming a blade of light. I casually tossed out the sacred sword, and the blade danced in the air like a nimble swallow. Along its trajectory, 7 skeleton soldiers were killed one by one without leaving even a speck of ash behind. Buzz. When the sword returned to my hand, the cold and scorching blade of light was still humming, as if it wasn't satisfied with its harvest. I nodded in satisfaction. As a weapon, there was nothing to be picky about. Now let's try the second mode. I reached for the dragon pattern on the hilt. There was a switch there to switch functions. Stop wasting time. We'll have plenty of time to play with it in the future. Help me protect it. The silly cat's words astonished me greatly. There were no enemies here, so why would she need my protection? The huge library that suddenly opened up and the magic books flying in the air explained everything. In the center of the temple, Harloise in her young girl form was smiling at me. You plan to advance at this time? Become an undead emperor? Nonsense. Help me guard it. Once I successfully advance, you'll have a thick thigh to cling to. After saying that, the silly cat started chanting, and the magic books around her became even more excited. Thus, after squatting for a week, I finally succeeded in my advancement. I could only continue squatting. It seemed like I would have to squat for a longer period of time this time. This was already the second month since the outbreak of San Antonio's civil war, but the storm showed no signs of stopping. On the contrary, as the war progressed, it was obvious that it was getting more and more intense. As time passed, it became clear who was behind Duke Barat and who had the ability to temporarily form an alliance between the demons and humans. An old acquaintance, Sophocles the Deceiver, the Chaos Demon Monarch, who was fond of conspiracies and art, successfully fooled the world again with a simple and experienced method. Under the schemes of the two Chaos Overgods, Maria's death was not unjust at all. If one had to ask who was the unluckiest and most embarrassed party in this civil war, it would naturally be the Holy Church. Although Roland was also innocently implicated, he was far more fortunate than the Holy Church, which had lost so many soldiers and lost so much face. In normal situations, the Holy Church would never participate in a kingdom's civil war, especially a civil war between mega-empires. San Antonio, which worshipped the god of Holy Light's teachings, should never participate. After all, the Holy Church was a religious faction, and San Antonio was the most common religious faction. No matter who won the civil war, it would be impossible for them to change their religious belief. San Antonio would still be the final victor. However, participating in another kingdom's civil war would not only make the other kingdoms look bad, but it would also be the first time that a divine authority would interfere with a major kingdom's royal authority. If the winner of the civil war wasn't San Antonio, the new victor would definitely have an extreme enmity with the Holy Church. San Antonio was the Holy Church's most loyal supporter. The Holy Church's reputation had already been greatly damaged, and they wouldn't be able to withstand such a huge loss. Unfortunately, this wasn't a normal time. The Holy Church had been forced to participate from the very start. The Holy Church spread the news that San Antonio's rightful successor, Queen Maria, was a chaos girl and naturally inclined towards the demons. They even provided sufficient evidence. The Holy Church's higher-ups saw that the situation wasn't right. San Antonio was a core territory that couldn't be lost. And so, the Pope and several archbishops were lured into participating. The Pope and the Holy Church's higher-ups were no idiots. It was the natural instinct of political creatures to bet on both sides. Although they accused Maria of being an enemy of the Holy Light, they didn't push things too far. They secretly sent out messengers to negotiate with Maria. The content of the negotiations was nothing more than, if you send out a notice to cut off all ties with the Chaos Abyss and devoutly worship the Holy Light, the Holy Church will cancel all hostilities against you. And if the negotiations really went on, Maria, who didn't have much of a relationship with the Chaos faction to begin with, would indeed agree when considering that most of her subordinates and commoners worshipped the god of Holy Light. However, the problem was with the messengers. The messengers were real, and they even had a letter personally written by Pope Maria. However, by the time the furious commoners received the letter, the contents of the letter had changed from a sincere plea to surrender to the Holy Church's declaration of war against heretics. And then, the fire was lit, and the mastermind behind the scenes added more fuel to the fire. Sophocles the Deceiver was a veteran schemer and mastermind behind the scenes. Sophocles the deceiver's history of scheming was even longer than the history of the Holy Light. Carwin's was also personally carrying out this scheme. This was basically a trap for the Holy Church. Next, Duke Barat, who was under Sophocles' control to begin with, stood up and swore to take revenge on the Holy Church and Prince Winston, who were the assassins. That was only natural. From a certain standpoint, the Chaos faction's primary target had always been the Holy Church. Roland was the one who had been dragged into this. Originally, Cavendish had followed the unwritten rules of the Holy War and hadn't intended to personally take action. But now that he saw that his older brother was here, he was quite happy to personally take action and make trouble for his older brother, Roland. Looking at the big picture, it was only natural that they would make trouble for the Holy Church. After all, just like San Antonio, the Holy Church was the #1 enemy of the entire Chaos faction. Who else would they target but the Holy Church? Compared to the Mist Alliance that was stuck defending the Northlands, the Holy Church was still the #1 faction in the Order faction. Their tremendous number of Holy Light believers made the God of Holy Light nearly undefeatable. In that case, it was only natural that the God of Holy Light would lose some believers first. San Antonio was the Holy Church's right-hand man, as well as the Holy Church's core territory, so it was only natural that the Holy Church would kill them first. Two main god-level demon lords personally plotted against Maria. Even a true god would die. Maria's death wouldn't be unjust at all. And now, the Holy Church's status was becoming more and more awkward. Duke Barrett's subordinates viewed the Holy Church as the true culprit behind the Holy Church's death. The Holy Knight and Angel squadrons that the Holy Church had brought with them had originally been used to deal with the ogres and demons. But now, the Holy Church was forced into a meat-grinder-like civil war. After all, nobody was willing to just sit around and wait for death. Barrett's faction wanted to fight and become the sole ruler of this country. Winston's faction couldn't possibly just sit around and wait for death. If one side didn't intend to stop fighting, it was impossible for the civil war to stop. As the Holy Church's losses increased, both sides became truly angry. There was no victor in this civil war from the very start. War refugees, deserters, adventurers, and so on. Every day, countless people would flee from the battlefield. There would be countless refugees on the road. And as the Civil War continued, the Holy Church's attacks on other humans were exaggerated and spread to every corner of the world. Of course, the Holy Church's image as a guardian of humanity was severely damaged. This had originally been the Holy Church's trump card for being undefeatable. The Southern sect and many other opposing factions wouldn't miss out on this opportunity. All sorts of attacks on the Holy Church never stop. Plus, the Holy Church's reputation was rapidly decreasing every day. Finally, two true gods of the Holy Church appeared on the battlefield. The heartless true gods had given mortals the fate of death, but it was impossible for the Holy Church to recover their reputation. Everyone knew that the Holy Church should retreat now. However, this would mean that they had completely given up on San Antonio. Not only that, the other holy churches would also be disappointed in San Antonio. Pope Coloma still couldn't make a decision. Yet, at the edge of the battlefield, another passerby appeared. Behind the black cape was a little girl who wasn't even 10 years old. They had come here from a meat-grinder-like battlefield without a single drop of blood on them. Harlois, how does it feel to become an undead emperor? It sucks. I've never felt like the journey was so long before. The little girl seemed to be having quite a hard time keeping up with me. I wanted to help her stay on my head like before, but she wasn't willing. She shrugged, and I didn't insist. Unlike me, who had long since experienced leveling up, Harlois had quite a large barrier to overcome. She failed several times, and it took her almost 2 months before she finally succeeded. Another small problem was that after her physical body evolved, although she still had the ability to transform into clones and could even strengthen herself, her true body would have to remain in its original form. From a certain standpoint, this was another special characteristic of becoming a semi-god. While becoming undying, one's physical body's appearance, size, and age would also be fixed. Harloise had quite a few stashes. Her lace princess dress looked quite cute, but she always tripped when walking. Since she didn't use any magic to strengthen her physical body, she was just like a pitiful little girl. Currently, Harloise was panting heavily. I didn't see any thick thighs, but her increasingly short legs were quite vexing for her. Even though it was quite nice to lie on my head, for some reason, she refused to use her original method of traveling. In that case, our originally slow journey naturally became even slower. You've taken so long. Is everything all right in the Northlands? No. Winter's already over, and everyone's busy with spring plowing. The new seeds seem to be quite good. Another benefit of bringing Harloise along was that her clones were the best communication devices. She had never stopped receiving information from the Northlands. Previously, there was a limit to the distance between her clones and the Northlands. It would seem that this was the result of her recent breakthrough. I felt slightly more reassured after hearing the Northlands' reports. San Antonio, in the southwest, was in complete chaos. However, the Northland situation was surprisingly good. The Holy Church's attention and strength was focused on the Northland situation, so they naturally didn't have much time to worry about the Northland situation. Instead, they should be worried about the Mist Alliance's revenge. The overall situation wasn't good, so the Holy Church's Divine Alliance had temporarily stopped all activities. From a certain standpoint, the Holy Church still owed me. It was as if I had been ambushed yesterday, and I hadn't taken revenge yet. Logically speaking, I should have just assassinated one or two of the Holy Church's higher-ups for fun. At the very least, that would give them a warning that they would have to pay a price if they dared to touch me. But looking at the current situation, taking revenge on the Holy Church would be equivalent to helping the Chaos faction. It wasn't my style to not take revenge. However, taking revenge would be helping the enemy, which made me feel rather conflicted. I had been rather hesitant over the past few days. In the end, I decided to note down this debt and not take revenge for the time being. You don't intend to go have some fun? Harloise was quite free. She actually seemed more human, now that she had reached semi-god rank. The death of the elven gods also represented the end of her hatred. As long as the Mist Alliance didn't collapse and the Elven Empire developed well, she indeed had the right to be free. Harloise no longer had any goals to pursue. She didn't feel any psychological pressure at all. She could even enjoy delicious food and beautiful scenery on the battlefield. It was as if she were on vacation every day. However, there were some things that were correct. After Harloise successfully broke through to become an undead emperor, she instantly became incredibly powerful. It would definitely be worth it for her to have such a binding equipment. I glanced at the main battlefield in the distance. The pointer of my magic compass was already pointing towards the sky. This meant that the magic power of both sides involved in this battle was off the charts. Even the true gods are getting serious. It's highly likely that they'll self-destruct if they lose. I don't want to get involved. I shook my head and rejected this rather tempting suggestion. Right now, San Antonio was the focal point of many dimensions. Unlike before, it was possible that all the powerful existences would personally participate in this battle. No matter if it was demon waves, angel waves, human wave tactics, true gods, demons, or semi-gods self-destructing, or all sorts of forbidden spells and combination magic, they were all incredibly dangerous. It would be truly embarrassing if I was mysteriously killed by them. Fundamentally speaking, this was already the frontline battlefield in the mortal plane. I didn't have the urge to die so easily just by myself and a cat, a young girl. They have their own internal battles. We have our own matters as well. The Chaos Girls definitely won't be easy to deal with. There's also Cavendish and Eliza. Then shall we return to the Northlands? Or to Bardi? To the Mage Country? But before we leave, I need to talk to someone. Who? Prince Winston? No, there's no meaning in talking to him anymore. He's been riding a tiger for a long time now. He'll have no choice but to accept this battle even if he doesn't want to. His own subjective thoughts won't matter at all. I want to talk to Pope Coloma. Chapter 731. Popes and whatnot were the most annoying. What I meant was that from the very start, the Holy Church had always been a potential competitor for us, and as the God of Holy Light's follower, Pope Coloma, who had the most authority and prestige in the entire world, had always been a wall that we couldn't get around. I had once thought about how wonderful it would be if some assassin got lucky and took advantage of Coloma, or if Coloma got choked on a walnut biscuit one day and couldn't catch his breath before dying. But some things only needed to be thought about. Since Coloma was able to stand at the very top of the Holy Church, which was a gathering of heroes, he was impeccable in both power level and intelligence. Many popes in the past had died of old age, but very few had died in battle. Being able to sit in Coloma's position meant that he had the strongest combat strength in the entire mortal plane. Although all the popes in the past looked old and decrepit, on average, they had been in power for more than 170 years. The current pope had only been in power for about 10 years. Even if all the cardinals died, Coloma might not necessarily die. When Coloma was still a cardinal, he had already killed the god of waves. Now that he had inherited Pope Coloma's power, he would definitely be one of the strongest individuals in the world. But now, I felt rather happy as I looked at the trembling old man in front of me. Hey, old man, you're not dead yet? Although Coloma still had the same face as before, his complexion was much worse than before. First, he had a kind appearance and a bottomless abyss. Now, he was giving off an astonishing pressure. However, I found it rather amusing. That was because only an old lion king whose authority was being challenged would have to bare his fangs and claws all day long to show off his existence. I laughed in schadenfreude, not hiding my delight at all. Roland! 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 His squinted eyes suddenly widened, filled with astonishment and disbelief. What followed next was undisguised hostility. Yep, it's me. You didn't recognize me? That's right, I'm already a level 4 individual. Without all of you pressuring me, there's no need for me to be in such a hurry to take this final step. I looked at the little old man in front of me with evil intentions. 2 months ago, he had been as steady as a mountain. Now, he was like a startled bird. Judging from his wrinkles and tired expression, he seemed to have aged more than 10 years in the few months that I hadn't seen him. What could be happier than making great progress? Naturally, it was discovering that the opponent had taken a big step back after making great progress. For those who cultivated divine arts, their mental state was more important than anything else. A firm will was the most important attribute for divine arts job class members. Wavering in their confidence and falling in their souls were the greatest sins. Powerful priests and archbishops were all much more patient than the last. Pope Coloma's mental state was clearly out of balance. His lifespan would definitely be shortened, and it was likely that his power level would greatly decrease. Why aren't you dead yet? If you're dead, we can save a lot of trouble. Heresy! The Pope's guards roared in anger, and the most impulsive one had already drawn his sword and rushed over. Then, with a flash of black shadow and a gust of black wind, the warrior disappeared without a trace. His angry roar still echoed in the air, but his figure had disappeared. This strange scene made the guards stop in their tracks, consciously standing in front of the Pope to protect him. I didn't want to explain. I took out my nail clippers and started to cut my nails. I didn't even look at them. The room was silent for a while. You're not here to watch the show, are you? That's right, of course I wasn't here to watch the show. I had a lot of things to do, and I didn't have the free time to watch someone else's show. The Pope also knew that if I had come with enmity, he wouldn't have wasted any words and would have immediately attacked me. And since I wasn't going to say anything nice, I was here to discuss something with sincerity. Still, if someone intended to attack me with a sword, I wouldn't mind collecting some interest first. I continued to remain silent as I patiently cut my nails, which were growing longer and longer. I had indeed been neglectful as I had been busy traveling. After a long period of silence, I finally spoke up. I'm here representing the Mist Alliance and the Southern Sect to re-establish a new alliance with you. Are you happy? I'm here to help you. If I had to discuss who had the deepest grudge against the Holy Church, I would definitely be at the top. If I had to discuss who wanted the Holy Church destroyed the most in the mortal plane, I would definitely be at the top as well. My own grudge, the Mist Kingdom's grudge, Estrada's grudge, the Northern Mist Tribe's grievances over the past few years, as well as the recent infighting in the open and in the dark. I had just been ambushed and killed not long ago. I really wanted the Holy Church to be destroyed as quickly as possible. But in the context of the entire world, it definitely wouldn't be a good thing for the Holy Church to be destroyed so quickly. Even if the sky collapsed, the tallest person would hold it up. Right now, the tallest person was doubtlessly the Holy Church. It was inevitable that the Chaos faction would relentlessly attack the Holy Church. If they didn't make trouble for the Holy Church, they would naturally make trouble for other countries and organizations. The current situation was doubtlessly a trap for the Holy Church. If the Holy Church continued to get involved in this internal conflict, not only would their reputation be damaged, the Holy Church would also continuously send reinforcements to the Holy Church, which would be a huge drain on their strength. If the Holy Church abandoned San Antonio, their reputation would also be damaged, and they would lose a lot of blood. Normally, I would be in a good mood if I didn't stab them in the back, not to mention helping them. But now, the Holy War had only been going on for a short 10 years. The Holy Church had fallen rather quickly. In the game's history, the Holy Church had also lasted for nearly 200 years before it completely disappeared. Even though the Holy Church's bishops and priests had all sorts of squandering methods, they had still been squandering for many years due to how rich they were. It wasn't like the current situation where the entire Holy Church had fallen into danger so quickly. From my conclusion, it was doubtlessly that I had been constantly trying to steal the Holy Church's resources, causing them to fall into a disadvantage from the very start. After losing the support of all the human factions, the Holy Church in the game's history naturally appeared to be strong on the outside but weak on the inside. The Holy Church could fall. In fact, I even hoped that they would fall. The God of Holy Light should fall. I cursed him to fall as soon as possible, but this definitely wouldn't happen within the next 20 years. After some calculations, I knew what would happen if the Holy Church fell. From an ordinary citizen's perspective, it would be as if the sky had collapsed and they would lose their faith in the Holy War. This would be a chain reaction that would cause them to lose confidence in the overall victory of the Holy War. Confidence and morale were things that didn't really exist, but they truly affected the war situation everywhere. A fallen flag could be raised again, but if it fell so quickly, it was unknown if the Chaos faction would even give us enough time to raise it again. In my timeline, the Holy Church should have slowly declined to the point of death. During this process, the new generation of heroes and gods would gradually establish new factions and organizations. Numerous flags would be erected all over the world, and it wouldn't be a big deal if the Holy Church's flag were to fall. And from a high-level combat strength perspective, the Holy Light's faith would suffer a major blow. The number of believers would greatly decrease, and the already weakened God of Holy Light would be greatly weakened. He would no longer be undefeatable. That would be a truly hilarious situation. In that case, all the Chaos main gods and demon lords would lose their restraints and unhesitatingly enter the mortal plane. Who would be responsible for dealing with all the Chaos main gods? Right now, there was a subtle balance between the Chaos main gods and the demon lords. As the strongest existence in the world, the God of Holy Light had far too much influence. Once the God of Holy Light was weakened, the so-called unspoken rules among the gods would naturally vanish without a trace. All the Chaos main gods would personally appear, and the Holy War would progress much faster. Although this would happen sooner or later, it would have to wait until the seeds of the Holy War sprouted. Many new outstanding individuals had already appeared in various places during the Holy War. However, it was still far from them being able to take charge. The new generation of Valkyries' reincarnations were only 10 years old. Once they reached adulthood, they would greatly improve the overall situation of the Holy War. From the Mist Alliance's perspective, the Holy Church's collapse wasn't a good thing. That was because the Holy Church's meat shield was now gone. Everyone could see that the Mist Alliance was in an excellent situation. In that case, the demons could also see that. Compared to other large trees that would be difficult to shake, the Chaos main gods would naturally first trample on the Holy Church's well-developed little sprout. New technological revolutions were currently occurring. New technologies were appearing every day. The longer this war dragged on, the stronger the vitality of the Holy Church would be. That was why the Holy Church absolutely couldn't collapse at this critical juncture. I felt helpless. Even though I felt helpless, even though I was filled with resentment, I could only mutter about how I'm only doing this for myself, in order to continue the Holy Church's growth. Of course, I wouldn't tell them the truth. In terms of face, I was only here as a former ally of the Mist Alliance to exchange for a new alliance. An alliance between the Mist Alliance and the Southern Sect? That's indeed quite attractive at this juncture. Then, what's the price? Pope Igor reached out his hand while leaning on his walking stick. He asked me what the price would be. All of it. Of course there's a price for this. You'll all be worried if I don't take advantage of the situation. Relax, I want a lot. Since I was already here, how could I possibly be satisfied if I didn't take advantage of the situation? More than 2 hours later, I left with several scrolls in satisfaction. Pope Igor and cardinals were left behind in the conference room with ashen expressions. What did I want? First, I wanted the entire Northland's Holy Battlefront Alliance. The Holy Church didn't have time to worry about the Northlands anyways. I didn't make any excessive demands that the Northland's Holy Battlefront Alliance join the Mist Alliance. I only requested that the Northland's Holy Church countries stop being enemies with the Mist Alliance and forbid them from supervising and controlling the Mist Alliance's resources. I also requested that the Holy Church's main headquarters withdraw from the Northlands. This was something that the Holy Church could accept. That was because the Holy Church didn't have much territory in the Northlands to begin with. The Northland's Holy Battlefront Alliance had also caused a lot of controversy within the Holy Church. The Holy Church had to invest a lot of resources in the Northlands without any direct connection to the Northland's Holy Battlefront Alliance. Now that the situation in Ike was worsening, it would seem foolish to invest resources in the Northlands, which had no direct connection to the Northlands. And once the new alliance was established, the Northland's Holy Battlefront Alliance would seem even more meaningless and wasteful. What would the Mist Alliance gain from this alliance? I could only say that it would be countless. Secondly, I requested that the Southern Sect's teaching of pure holy light be recognized as the orthodox teaching of holy light, and that Estrada be honored as a martyr and a holy disciple. Even though this was just something that I wanted to say, the entire conference room fell silent for a full 5 minutes when I said this. All the cardinals looked at me as if they wanted to eat me alive. The Holy Church was a religious organization, not a political organization. Disagreements with the Holy Church's teachings would be the most important thing for the Holy Church. Even if the entire Holy Church was destroyed, the Holy Church's teachings wouldn't be changed. If the Southern Sect's teachings, which didn't worship the God of Holy Light, were orthodox, then what was the God of Holy Light? What was the Holy Church, which worshipped the God of Holy Light as the highest God? This was something that the Southern Sect wouldn't agree to even if the entire Holy Church was destroyed. But since the Southern Sect wanted to form an alliance with the Southern Sect, they would at least need to silently acknowledge the southern sect's legitimacy. From a certain standpoint, this would be acknowledging the southern sect's existence. It would have been fine to silently acknowledge the southern sect's legitimacy, yet I just had to bring it up. This would be the height of stupidity when it came to diplomacy. However, I was incredibly delighted to see all the southern sect's elders' faces flushed red with anger, as well as the unlucky ones who were angered to the point of having their hearts beat erratically because of their holy light. I knew that it would be impossible for the southern sect to agree to my proposal of acknowledging the southern sect's legitimacy. That was only to disgust them. However, not only was my request disgusting, it was also filled with evil intentions. With Estrada's reputation and past achievements, it wouldn't be an exaggeration to call him a martyr or a holy disciple. In fact, such a saying had even been spread among the Holy Church factions. But in the end, everyone tacitly forgot about this old knight who had dedicated his entire life to the holy light. The reason? The one who killed Estrada was the god of holy light's incarnation, the god of holy light's will. In that case, why did the god of holy light confer the title of martyr and holy disciple on Estrada? Previously, when I said, acknowledging the southern sect's legitimacy, the southern sect's elders were only angry to the point of stomping their feet. Not only that, their hearts couldn't take it anymore, so they kept buffing themselves with holy light. When I asked for Estrada to be conferred the title of holy light, 2 of them even collapsed while clutching their chests. It was almost possible to see an old man performing mouth-to-mouth resuscitation. Even with such a situation occurring, I could still see the holy knight and priest representatives eagerly wanting to speak up. But in the end, after exchanging glances with each other, they all maintained a unified silence with complex expressions. In another 100 years, Estrada would probably become the Holy Church's greatest dark history. But right now, Estrada's disciples, students, and benefactors could be found in every corner of the Holy Church. There were plenty of low-level holy knight and priests who secretly sympathized with the pure holy light martyrs. There were also plenty of low-level holy knights who felt that the god of holy light had gone too far, which was why their faith in him had wavered. This was why there were voices within the Holy Church that spoke up against Estrada. I believed that after I left, the Southern sect and the Holy Church would maintain a certain amount of distance and peace between each other. The voices calling out for Estrada's innocence would only grow louder and louder. In that case, as time passed, the foundational beliefs of the Holy Church would be shaken. I'm Estrada's disciple, as well as the strongest holy light knight in the world. I've even inherited the hammer of holy light and the path of protection. Isn't it normal for me to call out for my teacher's innocence? My words were quite simple, direct, and sincere. They were all the truth that came from the bottom of my heart. The moment I said this, the holy light sword at my waist became the center of attention in the entire conference room. After confirming that I had indeed broken through to semi-God due to the concept of holy light, the other holy knight and holy light priests obviously looked at me in a different light. They were still on guard, but there was now more respect and understanding. The successor of the Hammer of Holy Light had always been the Holy Knight's spiritual leader in name and in reality. My status was indeed quite awkward, but as a mature Holy Knight, they would at least show me friendliness and basic etiquette. In the end, we stopped talking about this topic. After all, the God of Holy Light was an existence that we couldn't avoid. If we continued talking about this, it would likely lead to a religious war. Today, we were here to sign an alliance. All right, I understand your difficulties. In that case, at the very least, you can cancel the ban on Estrada. This isn't something that the God of Holy Light ordered you to do. Estrada has served the Holy Church for his entire life. At the very least, the younger generations should know who he is. This request isn't too much at all. All the Holy Knight and priests around me nodded silently. Seeing this situation, Pope Coloma sighed and finally made a compromise. Although the Holy Church didn't agree to make me a Holy Light Saint or recognize me as the Orthodox Holy Church, they also made a compromise. Maintaining peace with the Southern sect in private was a part of the alliance, and private discussion of Estrada and how to commemorate Estrada was now forbidden. However, these were only the least controversial and most acceptable parts of this alliance that was destined to be recorded in history. In the 10th year of the Dawn calendar, the Holy Church signed a secret alliance with the Southern sect and the Mist Alliance, reaching an agreement that was known in history as the Betrayers' Alliance. From then on, the Holy Church, which had been so powerful for so long, began to decline. I like this way of saying it. Let's record it down in our notebook. Chapter 732. Previously, they had only discussed the additional terms of the alliance. The core of the alliance was still the Southern sect, the Mist Alliance, and the Holy Church coming to an agreement in private. This was no small matter. If word of this got out, it would probably be even more important than the news of a god's death or San Antonio's death. Critics and strategists would definitely discuss and research it for half a year. The Southern sect wasn't just a simple holy church. Its influence had spread to every corner of He. Compared to the Holy Church, the Southern sect's teachings were simpler and more approachable. It was a true miracle of holy light. Most importantly, it wasn't as domineering as the Holy Church, which allowed it to gradually replace the original Holy Church's faith in remote areas. Together with the Holy Church, the Southern sect still occupied more than 70% of the human world's faith. Behind the Southern sect was the mega-empire Bardi. When considering the mage country's relationship with the Southern sect was a gigantic Southern alliance. As for the Mist Alliance, there was no need to mention it. Its physical existence occupied the entire Northland. The elves, beastmen, humans, and undead. Although their main faith wasn't the holy light, their influence in human society was still astonishing. Behind the Mist Alliance was the gods of Hades. This was a mega-faction capable of rivaling the entire Order faction. Nobody knew what else was behind the Mist Alliance. Between the three factions, there were faint signs of hostility. They were always on guard against each other and secretly hooked up with each other. Many people in the Holy Church viewed the Mist Alliance and the Southern sect as their number one enemy. They were even more threatening than the Chaos faction. After all, the Holy Church had a life-and-death relationship with the Chaos faction. However, the Southern sect and the Mist Alliance had a strange relationship where the Holy Church had finally defeated their mortal enemies with great difficulty, only to have the Mist Alliance and the Southern sect reap the rewards. What did this alliance mean to the Holy Church? What could the Holy Church obtain from this alliance? This wasn't written in the alliance. In fact, only the benefits were tangible. In that case, was the Holy Church an idiot? No, that wasn't it. The Holy Church could obtain tremendous benefits from this alliance, but those benefits couldn't be written into the alliance because they were far too despicable and shameless. If the three factions reach an alliance, that means that all of human society recognizes the Holy Church as the leader of the Holy Church in the Holy War. At the very least, on the surface, the Southern sect and Northern Mist Alliance won't openly challenge the Holy Church's authority. In that case, the Holy Church will be able to use their military forces to guard against the Southern sect and Northern Mist Alliance. Not only that, they'll be able to do something immoral. Yes, that was a major matter. It was a betrayal of all of San Antonio. Before the Holy Church reached an agreement with the two major factions, as long as the Holy Church abandoned San Antonio and voluntarily withdrew from the internal war, all the kingdoms and factions would pursue the Holy Church to the bitter end, challenging their right to lead the Holy War. You can even abandon the most loyal San Antonio, and you still expect others to trust you? Who knows if the next ally you'll betray will be us? In this world, the rule of the Holy Light Church wasn't a royal power, it relied on authority. Damage to reputation and credibility wasn't just empty words, the loss was irreparable. But, if the three major factions reached an agreement in private right now to betray and abandon San Antonio, that would be a decision made by all of human society, or at least the vast majority of human factions. This wasn't just a matter of not looking into it. Only San Antonio's interests would be harmed in this situation. This was also the foundational reason why I called this alliance the Traitors' Alliance. There was no saving San Antonio anymore, so let's give up on it. Anyone who said such a thing, even if it was the truth, would definitely be forever shamed by history. Of course, the Holy Church would be the ones to make such a decision, and the Holy Church would be the ones to be despised in the end. But, at least for now, all of human society would tacitly allow this to happen and treat it as dark history, so that they wouldn't attack the Holy Church. This was the true content of the alliance. Both sides knew about this, but neither side would say it out loud. However, the Holy Church would definitely do such a thing after obtaining the alliance. Although the Holy Church would suffer heavy losses, it would still be better than constantly losing blood in this bottomless pit, as well as losing reputation by slaughtering their own kind. Betrayal? Yes, this was betrayal. This was a ticking time bomb. The people of San Antonio would forever remember this day. All the lucky survivors would view the Holy Church as their mortal enemy. Their hatred for the Holy Church would be even greater than the Chaos Abyss demons and great demons that were currently destroying San Antonio's land. Of course, the prerequisite was that San Antonio would survive this calamity. Meanwhile, we would have the crucial time to prepare for war. San Antonio would forever be the human race's most powerful country. San Antonio had plenty of resources, enough to last them for several decades. No matter who the final victor of this civil war was, no matter who the final ruler was, they wouldn't allow their country to be filled with demons and great demons. This was how countries interacted with each other. Only benefits would be discussed, not emotions. It would always be better for another country to be unlucky than for their own country to be unlucky. Not only that, we weren't the traitors. We were only bystanders. In fact, we even generously helped the Holy Church out, so the Holy Church should be grateful to us. Grateful to you? Just this incident alone has caused Coloma to be forever shamed by history. Right now, he probably wants nothing more than to eat you alive, yet he still has to smile at you and forget about all the previous disagreements. Today is probably the most sullen moment of his entire life. The silly cat, the damned young girl's comments were as sharp as ever. And judging from Coloma's twisted expression, this was indeed the case. We tacitly agreed to forget about all the previous disagreements. We treated the Seraphim's death as if it had never happened. This was probably the boring tacit agreement between politicians. Of course, how long this alliance would last would depend on which side gained the upper hand first. Only when there were sufficient benefits would this alliance become meaningless. But since there were mutual benefits, this alliance would be incredibly solid. Actually, this was the same for all international alliances and agreements. Without a powerful arbitration organization and the ability to enforce them, the violator would have nothing to fear. These so-called alliances and agreements could only be maintained by mutual benefit. The moment that there were no mutual benefits, they would naturally become nothing more than scrap paper. I left by myself with the useless papers from the alliance. The moment I left, I immediately boarded an airship heading northeast. I didn't intend to experience the feeling of being surrounded and killed again. There were still many people in the Holy Church who wanted me dead. Both sides of today's secret alliance would likely have their reputations tarnished afterwards. However, I didn't really care. After all, my reputation was already tarnished enough. It would be a good thing for the Holy Church to be tarnished even more. The only one who would lose out from this was the third party, San Antonio. However, the strategic space and time gained from this alliance would be beneficial to the entire world. That was why both sides had tacitly agreed to betray this third party. I disguised myself as an elderly man with a cane and sat on the edge of the airship. I couldn't help but sigh as I looked at the prosperous streets below. How many people know that their own country, the strongest country in the entire continent, San Antonio, has already been destroyed? Chapter 733. It had already been half a month since the Shadow Alliance was signed. Many things had changed, but many things were still the same as before. 3 days after signing the Shadow Alliance, not only did the Holy Church not send any new reinforcements, some knight squadrons and angel squadrons that had suffered heavy losses were already retreating from San Antonio. It seemed that the Holy Church had reached some sort of secret agreement with Duke Barat. The Holy Church's forces retreated quite smoothly. The Holy Church's enemies simply watched as the Holy Church's forces retreated from the battlefield. And this was only the beginning. The Holy Church's forces began retreating from every battlefield, with the most elite angel squadrons retreating the fastest. If this continued, San Antonio would soon be the only ones left on the battlefield to fight their own civil war. The Holy Church had given up on Prince Winston? Had they given up on San Antonio? All sorts of news and rumors were spreading everywhere. Pope Coloma made an announcement, saying a bunch of nonsense like, "The Holy Church will forever protect San Antonio," and "The God of Holy Light is watching over the land of Holy Light," in order to appease the public. Of course, the government's words were always so heartwarming. At the very least, Pope Coloma's reputation as the representative of the Holy Light in the mortal world was quite high. Devout believers would still trust him. As for what happened afterwards, when the civil war reached the point where only one side could survive, the survivors wouldn't care about what Coloma had said before. And that would no longer have anything to do with me. The popularity of magical engineering technology greatly reduced the distance between countries. Although airship tickets for cargo and passengers were quite expensive and limited to only a few major cities, my starting point and destination were both the capitals of powerful countries in the continent. It would be quite worth it to take a comfortable and safe airship. But as the war progressed, this new transportation route also met with a new threat. Along the way, our airship met more than 10 waves of flying magical beasts, a passing green dragon, and more than 10 aerial knight squadrons. The green dragon and magical beasts were searching for food, while the aerial knight squadrons were patrolling the countries along the way. The current world was far from peaceful, so the aerial knight squadrons would keep an eye on every aerial target that passed by. But in the end, the magical beasts were driven away by the magic cannons. The green dragon and the aerial knight squadrons followed us for a while before finally turning around and leaving. The close to 100 medium-sized magic crystal cannons on the giant floating ship were one reason, but the main reason was because of the chess pieces hanging on the ship. Bardi's Dragon Head flag, the Mist Alliance's Stormwind Castle, the Ottoman Empire's crown flag, and the Fairy's Listener symbol were the chess pieces hanging on the bow of this passenger airship. This represented that this tiny passenger airship was backed by 4 major organizations. The reason was simple. Only the Mist Alliance and Ottoman Empire possessed the technology to construct large airships capable of transporting goods and passengers across international borders. Neither of the Mist Alliance nor Ottoman Empire would miss out on such an excellent business opportunity. The vicious competition between the two factions had finally transformed into a cooperative monopoly. Not only would Bardi be able to keep up appearances, there would also be an additional reason. The fairies had also been invited to become a shareholder of Bardi. Their intelligence and organizational abilities would be far too useful in the transportation industry. The Neutral Mist Alliance would be able to organize the transportation of goods and passengers. This would also allow the participating countries to lower their guard. At the very least, it would be far more reassuring than the gigantic organizations like Bardi and the Mist Alliance. In this generation, aviation laws didn't exist at all. The concept of sea routes had only just been introduced. The sailors and captains of the airships were all highly experienced seafarers. Even the tools used to determine the direction and coordinates of the airships were the same ones used on the sea. It would be quite common for the airships to accidentally deviate from the sea route. This wouldn't be a big deal at sea, as the airships would simply turn around and return to their original location. But in a continent with no ruler, it would be a huge problem for an airship to trespass into another country's territory. Not only that, it would be an armed airship trespass, which might even cause a war. That was why we often saw aerial night squadrons following us. Perhaps it was because the Mist Alliance, Bardi, and Ottoman Empire's flags were sturdy enough, or perhaps these countries were already used to it. Most of the time, the aerial night squadrons would only follow us for a while and watch us leave the airship. There were other situations as well. Sometimes, the aerial night squadrons would board the airship of their own volition. Although this was more or less a form of supervision, it was also common to hear the night squadrons chat about their country's customs and customs. Some of the more cheerful ones would even perform for their guests. There was a dark-skinned scorpion knight who was also an excellent dancer. Her desert-style dance left a deep impression on me. This happened several times on the airship. Not only did the aerial night squadrons ease the tension of the passengers, it also made us look forward to the rest of the journey. Of course, judging from how the aerial night squadrons skillfully accepted red packets from the airship crew when they left, it was likely that they already had a contract with the Mist Alliance. Or perhaps they were simply there to appease their guests. At the very least, it seemed that long-distance passenger transportation between countries was a highly profitable business. I did a quick calculation. This airship would leave every 3 days, and there would be 300 to 400 passengers on board. There were several different grades of airship tickets, but the cheapest one would cost more than 2,000 gold coins. A VIP ticket would cost 10,000 gold coins each, which would be enough to buy a decent manor in the capital. Only major merchants or major nobles would be able to afford such a ticket. If nothing unexpected happened, they would probably be able to earn several million gold coins. This would be even more profitable than robbing a bank. However, it seemed that the expenses were quite high. Not to mention the depreciation of the airship, the world wasn't safe, and the magic crystal cannons and the permanent bodyguards on the airship were quite expensive. Over the past few days, I had seen 2 legends and 1 saint youngster. They were all wearing the armband of a public security officer, so they were probably the airship's bodyguards. However, when considering the current chaotic situation in Ike, perhaps this was already quite a good deal. The road tolls and checkpoints were quite disgusting. Some areas were battlefields, and forcefully passing through would be no different from suicide. Traveling on the air would be much less troublesome than traveling on land. After all, compared to flying magical beasts, deserters and bandits were far more dangerous. At the very least, it seemed that these airships had several major countries' flags, so the airships were 100% safe. The passengers were quite confident in their safety. This confidence had been tossed aside when the Green Dragon attacked, but reached its peak when the Green Dragon finally chose to leave. As expected of the Mist Alliance, even the dragons don't dare to touch their airship. It should be the Bardi Empire. Our country's Dragon Knight Squadron is famous all over the world. That dragon must be afraid of being hunted down by our country's Dragon Knight Squadron. Although that Bardi citizen's words caused all the Bardi citizens present to feel proud, I almost laughed out loud. After all, I understood the dragon language. Damn it, a flying metal can. I heard that meeting one will bring good luck. Metal can, please bless Natasha with accepting my love. Please bless me with many treasures. Please bless me with... That dragon's frightening roar was actually based on the newest rumor among the dragons. He prayed that he would meet with good luck, and that he would leave in the end. This wasn't a decision made after weighing the pros and cons, but rather because he was satisfied with his wish. However, there were some things that these customers weren't wrong. Considering the special relationship between Bardi and the dragons, any domestic dragon, that was connected to Dragon City wouldn't attack Barty's airships. In fact, that rumor had been spread by Dragon City, which supported Barty and Little Red's Dragon City. There was also a part of the rumor that attacking an airship would bring bad luck. However, this was also the truth. Dragon City would receive a share of this business as well. Attacking an airship would be the equivalent of cutting off the Dragon Queen and Dragon King's source of income. It would be strange if the wild dragons didn't suffer. This was another reason why Barty had been dragged into this business. Of course, there was no such thing as absolute safety in this world. As the war progressed, accidents would occur sooner or later. Not everyone would be able to communicate with each other, such as running into a squadron of flying demons. However, as the war progressed, land travel would become even more difficult and dangerous. This business would always have potential. Having a secret agreement with the Holy Church also meant that this business could reach the Holy Church's sphere of influence. This would be a tremendous source of income. More income also meant more ammunition and food, which meant that the Mist Alliance's national power was growing by the day. Perhaps we were the most suited to the environment of the Holy War. There's a group of flying demons in front of us, succubi and four-winged berserk demons. Warnings sounded in my ears as the sailors hurriedly urged the passengers on the deck to take shelter in the cabin. Meanwhile, Harlowe shot me a dissatisfied expression. You can blame me for this? Isn't this normal? The demon wave has ended, and the Chaos Abyss has entered an active period. There are countless Chaos Abyss gates now. We've encountered demon armies, demon lords, and so on. Old man over there, little girl, hurry and take shelter. Grandmaster Rakage, please attack. The magical radar has detected that a demon lord has appeared. Alright then, I decided to shut up. Chapter 734. The beginning of the demon wave was a historical event, as well as a symbolic moment of the Holy War. It meant that the Chaos Abyss had successfully connected to the mortal plane. It would be incredibly difficult for any Chaos Abyss resident who wasn't in the Holy War to come to the mortal plane. Even if the Chaos Abyss residents managed to come to the mortal plane, they would be repeatedly weakened, and might even be exterminated if they weren't careful. But now, not only was it easier to open the door to the mortal plane, the powerful demons that came wouldn't be suppressed by the dimensional laws. However, there were always losses to be gained. Previously, the dimensional laws had an upper limit and forcefully suppressed visitors from the Chaos Abyss. This meant that demon lords could only send out their incarnations, clones, or descendants. Even if they suffered losses in the mortal plane, they wouldn't be completely destroyed. But now, with the current situation, other demons were sending out their true bodies. Not only would it be embarrassing to send out an incarnation, one wouldn't even be able to get anything if they didn't have enough power. Being repeatedly attacked by others would also weaken one's source. Powerful mages could take advantage of this opportunity to attack the true body, steal its power, and enslave its true name. This obviously wasn't worth it. That was why all the demons that came were sending out their true bodies. However, the side effect of increasing one's power level was that the risks would greatly increase. Often, death would be a true death. The purgatory soul-locking shark Shikblair was a powerful demon. He was a rather rare high-level demon that evolved from a scavenger shark from the river Styx. He looked just like a large black fish swimming in black mist. Only his bloodthirsty red eyes could be clearly seen in the black mist. He was quite frightening when he appeared at night. This type of creature loved to eat souls. Although it was impossible for them to enter the river Styx, they would always swim around the river Styx, waiting for an opportunity to ambush newborn demons that had just arrived at the river Styx. They would prey on the newborn demons' flesh and souls that hadn't completed their transformation. This was why they were called scavengers. Every creature would instinctively protect the young. Demons would always kill them on sight. The lucky survivors that managed to escape from the soul-locking shark's jaws would always remember to take revenge after they grew up. The fact that Schickblair was able to grow from an ordinary low-intelligence demon to a demon lord was evidence of how extraordinary he was. Currently, within his protective mist, black chains were restraining numerous wailing mortal souls. Fresh souls were his snacks, and the pitiful screams of despair made him feel even more delighted. As a great demon with the ability to fly, most of his subordinates were also flying demons. Unfortunately, the possibility of their growth in his race was too low. Most of his subordinates were winged demons and succubi. The former was a large category of demons. Those that had wings and could fly counted. Most of them were regular, muscular demons. Some were simply other demons that devoured flying demons and grew wings. Their appearances ranged from gorillas with wings to wolf-headed monsters with wings. However, if they chose the ability to fly, they would naturally lose weight and increase their wingspan. The melee combat abilities that demons were so proud of would naturally be weakened. Generally speaking, winged demons were not tricky to deal with. Generally speaking, when these erroneous evolution products reached senior level, they would grow a second pair of wings to improve their flying ability and upper limit of weight. The latter was a succubus, which was a rare humanoid creature among demons. There was probably no need to introduce her since she was far too famous. A demon lord, a rare soul shackle shark, 13 succubi, more than 200 miscellaneous winged demons, and a small team of specially evolved 4-winged berserk demons. This is a little troublesome. The ordinary guests were all hiding in the warehouse, while the sailors and warriors were fighting on the deck of the airship. The magic crystal cannons on both sides of the airship kept firing. Although the demons were quite nimble in the air, there were very few results. The flying demon squadron had already caught up to the airship. It would be impossible for the slow airship to shake off their pursuit. However, the demons weren't in a hurry to attack, as they were observing the situation on our side. "Master, please make your move." The demon that the captain of the airship managed to shake off was a warrior monk named Rakage. Have the warrior monks protect the airship? Who would have such a genius idea? I felt that this plan was becoming more and more unreliable. Everyone knew that the warrior monks were experts in close combat. As long as the distance was close enough, it would be difficult for the warrior monks, who were experts in close combat, to use their mid-range and long-range weapons. I myself had once been beaten up by the undead warrior monks, and the earth elemental god Omdorokan was the strongest warrior monks I had ever seen. His melee combat skills were basically like cheating. It wasn't that the warrior monks weren't strong. In fact, even high-level warrior monks were ridiculously strong. However, this job class probably had the shortest attack range out of all the job classes. Hire them to protect the airship? How would they attack the airship? Energy wave or origin bullet? Rakage appeared to be in his 30s, and he seemed quite young when he smiled with squinted eyes. However, he was already at the saint rank. This didn't mean that he was a genius, but rather that the warrior monk's job class was capable of slowing down the aging process. However, he was currently squinting his eyes and meditating, as if he had a card up his sleeve. No, perhaps Rakage has some special ability, such as a special bloodline or technique, such as a no-fly domain or a gravitational space. Perhaps Rakage even has a soul world. However, Harlois had a different opinion. Judging from how calm Rakage was, it seemed that he really did have some ability. The guards all came out. 1 saint rank, 3 legends, archers, swordsmen, mages, and even a bunch of silver and gold soldiers. Even gold, who used to be regarded as masters, could only be viewed as cannon fodder. It was truly amazing how the world had changed. Magic crystal cannons were quite powerful, but they were still a bit lacking when used against demons. Abyss creatures were born with excellent fire resistance, so it was quite common for them to resist explosions. Plus, demons were quite fast at flying, so these cannons wouldn't be much of a threat. In order to save money, it was also impossible for the airship to be equipped with escort airships to form a firepower system. In the end, it all depended on the regular guards. More than 10 winged demons were ordered to descend. They rashly attacked. Although this was only a probing attack, if they crashed into the wooden deck, they would definitely leave a hole in it. Rakage moved. He abruptly turned into a shadow, leaping and flashing continuously. Only the muffled sound of fists hitting flesh reverberated in the air. By the time he landed, the fallen demons had already become indistinguishable minced meat. Rakage then glared angrily at the demons that were still circling in the sky. The aura around him boiled as if he was preparing for some ultimate attack. "You've got guts. Get the hell down here." Alright then, we were taking things for granted too early. Was this the new generation's taunting ability? It would seem that hiring warrior monks to guard the airship wasn't because these warrior monks were special. If it wasn't for the fact that they were the only warrior monks available, it was likely that Rakage was simply trying to take advantage of the situation. After all, warrior monks were the cheapest to raise, and they didn't require any weapons or equipment. Warrior monks were the type who viewed life as bitter and self-tempering, so it would be the cheapest to hire them. Sometimes, Rakage would even only need to provide food and lodging. As expected, I can't take advantage of the situation. I even heard the mutterings of the man wearing a captain's hat. It would seem that this was how the advertisement for saint-ranked individuals to protect the airship came about. Since I was standing at the exit of the airship, how could warrior monks, who were skilled at training their senses, possibly not hear it? The middle-aged monk's face flushed red with anger, but he was unable to do anything about it. He could only viciously glare at the demons in the sky. The demons weren't in a hurry. Although they would have long since gone crazy for fresh flesh and souls, the recent days of hunting had already satisfied their instinctive desires. Now they were more like a pack of wolves that moved for the pleasure of hunting. Unlike other demons, the soul-shackling shark Shikblair had no intention of staying in the mortal plane ever since he entered. He simply flew around as he pleased and enjoyed himself wherever he went. He would come down to hunt whenever he was hungry, and he would come down to hunt whenever he was free. The lone sky night-knights were completely unable to stop him. The flying demons were roving bandits. Without a doubt, they were the most dangerous group of creatures. It would be impossible for ordinary villages to resist their attack. Right now, the demons were circling around the airship. This was doubtlessly a type of test. If they met a powerful enemy, they would unhesitatingly turn around and flee. If they discovered that the enemy was no threat to them, then it was likely that everyone on the airship would be finished. So what if the warrior monks were capable of fighting? As long as he could sink the airship, everyone on the airship would die. Honestly, next time, I'll definitely recommend that they bring in Sky Night. Even if they want to save money, they can't do this. Actually, if I didn't meet you, I probably wouldn't have met such an opponent. Harlois wanted to call me a jinx again, but I wasn't going to take the blame for that. Just how many levels are there in the endless chaos abyss? How many tens of thousands of demons are there? As the holy war progresses, there will only be more and more demon hordes. Even if we didn't meet a demon this time, we'll meet a demon next time. It's already outdated to use the standards from 1 year ago. The demon wave has already ended, and we're already in the middle of the holy war. Times were changing far too quickly. The standards that I had set yesterday might be outdated today. Even if my aura of misfortune increased the chance of accidents by 10 times, it would still be the same if I met a demon every 10 times. It would seem that the cost is going to increase. Wool comes from the sheep's back. Let's just double the price for the airship. Yep, in that case, let's just hire the dragons. They can even be used as a selling point to increase the price of the airship. I'll have a chat with Halent and Little Red when I get back. If we continue to save money, something will really happen. At such a time, it would be impossible for me to not take action. Sigh. I sighed, causing the air around me to tremble slightly. Everyone could hear my sigh, and then a violent wind started blowing as dark clouds gathered. Right after that, Even though the weather was clearly getting warmer, snowflakes began to fall. The snowflakes suddenly transformed into a snowstorm. The wind suddenly became even stronger, and snow began to accumulate on the airship at a visible speed. Breaking through the bottleneck of semi-god meant that my physical body no longer had any limitations. This was a foundational improvement. My ice magic power had also greatly improved. Controlling the power of the elements would also require a correspondingly strong physical body. Semi-god was a major hurdle. At this point, even if my ice magic sword hadn't taken its final form yet, it wouldn't be like before, where I would have to rest for several months due to the recoil of magic from just casting a forbidden spell. This was the difference between mortals and non-humans. It was also the foundational reason why demons, angels, gods, and dragons were so unbelievably strong. Using their sayings, it would be that magic flows through my veins, my will can control the elements, and my anger can dispel any mortal's little toys. If a mortal's maximum elemental capacity was 10, then these gold tribes would be able to contain more than 100. The foundational difference in elemental mass meant that mortal spells wouldn't have much of an effect on them. This wasn't the first time I had seen a dragon use its angry roar to dispel a mage's spell. This fact gave them the right to look down on mortals. They had the right to do as they pleased. Before reaching semi-god, humans would only end up killing themselves if they messed around, just like lifting a truck with their physical body. Perhaps it would be possible for a short period of time, but if they weren't careful, they would end up killing themselves. After becoming a semi-god and fusing with the highest level angel bloodline, I was definitely no ordinary semi-god. The power of the war angel incarnation had truly merged into my physical body. If the red dragon's elemental mass was over 100, then my elemental mass was at least over 1,000. Let's try it out. Ice magic gathered in my hands. Just as I was about to test out the power of my ice magic sword, the airship suddenly tilted, and I almost fell over. I heard a sailor's exclamation outside the window. The airship tilted. The engine on the left has stopped working because of the snow. I paused in surprise, and the power of ice and snow in my hands naturally dissipated. Harloise was tugging on my clothes in order to prevent herself from falling over. She and I exchanged glances. "I'm sorry. I don't know what kind of expression I should have at a time like this." "Just embarrass yourself, just like always." The silly cat's smile made me want to toss her out of the airship. Meanwhile, a white-haired female mage hurriedly rushed over. As a legend rank mage, she would be far too weak if she couldn't sense the magical waves of a spell that was so close to her. "Master Harloise, please stop casting your spell. The airship won't be able to handle it." This mage, who was so old that she was about to die, noticed that my face was covered in wrinkles. She paused in surprise for a moment before asking me to stop casting my spell. She even asked me to go to the deck and help her. I was already feeling rather helpless. Nothing had been going well for me recently. It was impossible for me to hide in the airship's cabin and solve the problem. I casually tossed aside my walking stick and suddenly grew taller. My aura and physical appearance simultaneously changed as I instantly transformed from an old man into a young man. I cracked my neck and felt much more comfortable. "You actually want a passenger to protect themselves? You really should return the airship ticket. Why do I remember that you asked for a ticket from a local messenger? You didn't even spend any money." The silly cat continued to make fun of me as always. I directly ignored her attempts to convince me. "Then I'll compensate you for the psychological damage I caused. I've been so poor recently. Since I can't cast a large-scale spell, then I'll use the Ice Magic Sword's Death Arena rules. We're going to fall off. 7 deadly sins? All the other passengers will die, and we'll still fall off. Or, can you control those vengeful spirits so that they don't harm anyone?" I felt even more helpless now. I decided not to take an airship next time. It would be quite troublesome to even attack in such a special space. It would be fine if a group of succubi, winged demons, and other small demons came, but if a Chaos main god blocked the airship, I haven't even said it yet, and you're not even letting me think about it? I did my best to pry away the silly cat's hand that was covering my mouth. Was I such a jinx? She wasn't even letting me think about it? Roland, come out. I already knew that you'd be on this airship. I've been waiting for you for a long time. This voice sounded rather familiar. Sophocles the Deceiver? It's Sophocles the Deceiver. Chapter 735. Sophocles had 2 wings, 2 horns, and a dark gray body that was quite fit. He had hands and feet, and he carried a great sword on his back. Sophocles' murky yellow eyes contained complex emotions. He stared at me with eyes that were even larger than mine. His gaze was filled with vigilance. Apart from the fact that he was slightly larger than me, there was nothing special about him. The airship isn't even as large as his fist. Are you sure that you call that slightly larger? TSK, so what if he's large? Who knows if he's just an embroidered pillow? Sophocles' gigantic head approached the airship's deck, and he breathed out a breath that sounded like lava from hell. However, this breath was actually just the breath of a gigantic demon. Roland, you're still the same as before. Sophocles' voice almost blew me away. The saint-ranked warrior monks and legends around me were all stunned by his demonic aura and couldn't move at all. Alright, a large one is indeed amazing. This was different from the day when I met Sophocles at the Hades. Back then, I had the 4 elemental pillars behind me and countless powerful subordinate. Even main gods could be used as cannon fodder. But now, Sophocles' true body had arrived. He was a mega-existence capable of destroying an entire country or even an entire continent. Sophocles' gigantic body reached the clouds just by standing up straight. Just judging by his size, this schemer who was skilled at trickery and deception seemed to be even larger than Donades, the Chaos War God. He seemed more like a war god. Long time no see, Aphu. What business do you have with me? Aphu? No. I'm Sophocles, the venerated Chaos main god Sophocles. The demon main god instantly exploded. The smell of sulfur made me feel like I was inside a volcano. The airship's deck started creaking as cracks spread at a visible rate. TSK, TSK, TSK. Your temper is just as bad as before, Aphu. Sophocles. I'm Sophocles the Deceiver, Sophocles the Deceiver. The idol of all deceivers and schemers, the wisest demon Sophocles. Alright, Aphu. I shook my head. This guy. Sophocles Ilastankovin gasped. I almost said my true name. I know you. This is your scheme. You want to trick me into revealing my true demon name. What kind of evil spell is this? Even the wise Sophocles almost fell for it. I sighed helplessly. Apart from using exclamation marks, this fellow also seemed to have delusions. Why didn't I realize that he was so funny back then? Afu, you're a great demon, yet you say others are evil? It's just that your IQ is low, Afu, right? Afu, how are you, Afu? Have you eaten, Afu? How's your mother? Afu. The great demon slapped its face with its claws, and the sound was like thunder. The black fish overlord behind him was trembling as it hid behind him, but disaster fell from the sky. The demon lord's claw landed, and the demon overlord was thrown into his mouth. Gotcha. Sure enough, when you're in a bad mood, you have to eat a lot. Afu chewed with big mouthfuls and only calmed down after a long time. When he opened his eyes again, the red light in his eyes had returned to normal. He had already calmed down. Afu, do you still remember the feeling of being surrounded and beaten up by the abyss dragons? Just as I was about to continue teasing him, our small talk was interrupted. The white-haired female mage was pitifully tugging on my clothes. My lord. Your Highness Roland. She pointed at the crumbling airship, which was now full of cracks, as she begged me with tears in her eyes. Please stop teasing Ah Fu. You're fine, but we can't take it anymore. Milord Ah Fu, no, Milord Sophocles, please don't look at me like that. Please don't steal my soul. The white-haired female mage's legs kept trembling as the demon lord viciously stared at her. She was about to pee. The ground and her mage robe were all wet. It would seem that she had peed already. As a gentleman, it would be best for me to pretend that I didn't see anything. And so, I gave her a thumbs up and turned around to smile at the Chaos Main God who was glaring at me angrily. Good job, young lady. You're so fearless. I have high hopes for you. Come, let's pee together in front of the demon lord. As I said that, I really started taking off my pants in front of Sophocles. What? I wasn't a gentleman enough? A true gentleman wouldn't care about such senseless etiquette. I was using practical actions to alleviate the young lady's embarrassment. Since she was already dirty, then everyone else should be dirty together. That would make it seem like she wasn't too dirty. Well, at least in theory, wouldn't it? Roland, don't even bother trying to anger me. I, Sophocles, am no newbie. I won't lose my rationality over such a small level of provocation. Before saying that, please let go of the pitiful succubus and four-winged berserk demon that you twisted into a dough twist. Also, take care of the pressure that you were emitting. Those demons were all killed by you. I chuckled and stopped teasing Ah Fu. Sophocles' guess was correct. From the very start, I had been trying to anger Ah Fu. Anger was a very interesting emotion. On the battlefield, some people would become more ferocious and powerful because of anger, while others would reveal flaws and become weaker. If I wasn't mistaken, Ah Fu and I were both the latter. We were warriors who used our brains to calculate. Losing our rationality would only cause flaws in our traps and strategies, greatly weakening our combat strength. Perhaps angering Sophocles would indeed be rather difficult, but there was nothing wrong with trying. Even if I couldn't completely anger him to the point of losing his rationality, too much anger would still subconsciously affect the accuracy of my actions and the stability of my thoughts. That's right, I was already fully prepared for battle. From the moment that I saw Sophocles, I knew that it would be difficult for today's battle to end peacefully. I was already prepared for a cruel battle to the death. Demons were definitely no good people. Things like Night Spirit or fair duels were nothing more than jokes. Demons would unhesitatingly eliminate any enemy that could threaten them. From the moment that the demon wave arrived, I knew that a demon lord would come knocking on my door sooner or later. However, I never expected that Sophocles would be the first to come. I had thought that Sophocles was someone who was used to scheming. Rather than personally taking action, he would feel that using someone else to do his dirty work would be a better way to show off his intelligence and tactic. I had originally thought that someone like Donades would come knocking on my door first. I didn't expect that it would be Afu, who had already suffered several times at my hands. The Dawn Holy Light sword at my waist was humming slightly. It seemed that the prey before it was far too suitable for its taste. Since I already knew that a demon lord would come knocking on my door sooner or later, of course I would be prepared. This Dawn Holy Light sword was definitely a demon's natural enemy. It was always best to use a trump card the first time it appeared. My Dawn Holy Light sword was truly fortunate to be able to use Afu, the impersonator, as a sacrifice. I placed my right hand at my waist as my entire body faintly glowed with holy light. I had a smile on my face as I prepared myself for a battle to the death. Holy light, however, Afu suddenly took a step back. Take a look at the situation around you. Do you think that they'll be able to survive if we attack? Black smoke was rising from every part of the airship. The deck and the body of the airship were covered in cracks. The powerful guards on the airship were all lying on the ground. Just being in close contact with a Chaos Main God was far too difficult for them. If even these powerful individuals were in such a state, then it was likely that the ordinary people in the airship's cabins were already heavily injured or dead. Order main gods had their own personal domains of order. Demons at the level of demon lord or higher would have the twisted power of chaos that would instinctively corrode the surrounding environment. This was just as normal as breathing for them. However, it was already too much for ordinary people to bear. Of course I could see it. I had been paying attention all this time, but what could I do? Actually, I can return what you just said to me. I, Roland, am no newbie. Do you really think that these people can be used as hostages to restrain me? From the moment that you appeared, they were dead for sure. At most, I'll find a chance to make it up to their families, and then attack you even more viciously. I smiled as I said my threat, but it was the truth. I would never hold back against a chaos main god. Rather than having so many misgivings about restraining myself from attacking and dying because of the chaos main gods, I would rather pretend that they didn't exist. At most, I would make it up to them in the end. If a chaos main god came, they would die. That would be all. We didn't hide our conversation from others. The guards who hadn't died yet were looking at me with rather complex expressions. They probably looked at me with hatred and even fear. From a certain standpoint, choosing to board this airship was the cause, and their deaths were the effect. Their hatred wasn't without reason. Did they have no way to survive? No, they did. And right now I was trying to fight for their survival. You used holy light to break through to semi-god? I lightly flicked the hilt of my sword, causing the blade of holy light to shine with a pure light that lit up the entire world. Fu took another step back, this time due to his demon instincts. Yeah, I knew that you would come looking for me sooner or later, so of course I had to use holy light to break through. Right now, I'm probably the strongest holy light knight in the entire world. Fu hesitated for a moment, but finally did his best to squeeze out a smile that was even uglier than crying. Actually, I didn't come here today to fight you. I have some things to discuss with you. I chuckled. Was that really the case? Sophocles' personality wasn't the type to personally fight to begin with. Even if he really wanted to fight me, he definitely would have done so already. How could he possibly let me come out of my cabin and give me time to prepare? And if I showed even the slightest bit of fear or guilt, he definitely wouldn't let go of such a good opportunity. At the very least, a probing battle would be unavoidable. Only if I acted like I was willing to kill him at all costs and had an ace card in my hand that he couldn't see through would he give up on probing me and directly talk business with me. Angering him and forcing him to attack was actually because I had seen through his suspicious personality. I acted like I was confident in killing him, scaring him into not attacking or even probing me. That was the only chance for the passengers to survive. And since I was fighting for that chance for them, Fu, let's talk somewhere else. Sophocles. I'm Sophocles, not some damned Fu. Alright, Fu. I'll remember, Fu. No need to repeat yourself, Fu. You bastard who deserves to be burned to death by holy light. Do whatever you want. Chapter 736. From a certain standpoint, when I discovered that Sophocles hadn't come here in order to kill me, at least, his main goal wasn't to kill me, I understood what was going on. What could a demon lord possibly want to discuss with me? The weather was nice today? Were we going on a field trip? Right now, they were only interested in more slaughter and souls in order to better occupy more territory in the mortal plane. Looking at it from a more distant perspective, they were more interested in how to obtain more power, a higher status, and a larger territory. Weren't they similar to wild beasts? The law of the jungle in the chaos abyss had indeed created a large number of intelligent forest beasts. Although Sophocles was known as the most cunning demon and the demon closest to the devil himself, he was still a demon in the end. I knew better than anyone what demons wanted and needed. Afu, do you want to kill that demon lord and need my help? Yes, I felt that Sophocles was definitely here to sell out his teammate. After all, 4 demon lords, their true mortal enemies were never existences from the mortal plane, but rather the residents of the chaos abyss, who were just like them. In the chaos abyss, the demon lords would forever be at war. In terms of grudges and conflicts of interest, the demon lords were the true mortal enemies. As for the war against the mortal plane, from a certain standpoint, describing the Holy War as a war between countries might be quite appropriate for the Order faction, but it would be rather hilarious for the Chaos faction. For the Order faction, this was nothing more than a hunt. They only cared about what they could obtain. Thinking about the overall situation? Sacrificing for the overall situation? What a joke! If I sacrificed myself, who would compensate me? I was thinking about the overall situation, but did those bastards know how to think? In the long run? Did we have the long run? The territory in this war would belong to whoever obtained it first. From the very start, the Chaos faction couldn't even be called loose sand. They were a bunch of bastards who would attack their allies at any moment. This was the foundational reason why the Order faction, which was far weaker than the Chaos faction, was able to maintain such a subtle balance. Of course, the Order faction wasn't much better off. The Holy Church had just sold out San Antonio and even built a defensive line against the Mist Alliance in the Northland. I couldn't even remember how many times I had made the Holy Church suffer. I had just been killed by an angel a few days ago, but at the very least we were still allies. Even if we backstabbed each other before going to bed, as long as we didn't die the next day, we could still smile and eat breakfast together. Is this a comparison of who's worse? Indeed, this is a comparison of who is worse. Most things in this world are about comparing who's worse, especially war. Isn't it about who gets toyed to death first and who makes more mistakes? Compared to the Chaos Abyss, the Order faction was already doing quite well. At the very least, there were still faint rules and moral restrictions between us, so we wouldn't be eaten up by the wolves if we revealed any flaws. Compared to the Chaos faction, the Order faction had a direct and bloody conflict with the faction had. The Order faction was the same. The Order faction Chaos faction was the faction. Their conflict of interest with the mortal plane's residents was direct and bloody. This was the relationship between the predator and the prey, as well as the relationship between the aggressor and the invaded. Anyone who had anything to do with demons was destined to become public enemy number one. With such a major background, Sophocles definitely wouldn't be looking for me to come to an agreement with him to deal with a certain mortal plane faction or individual. Even if his target was the Holy Church, I still wouldn't possibly agree to help him. This was the general direction of the Holy Church, and there would be no end of trouble if I went against it. That's why you came looking for me again. Since you're not going to fight to the death with me, you're going to make me suffer. Sophocles stood in front of me. This time, he was a dark-skinned, middle-aged gentleman with 2 horns on his head and gold-rimmed spectacles that pretended to be refined. There was also a white wooden table and a parasol in front of him. Sophocles was still pretending to be a refined scholar in his human form as he sipped tea while reading a newspaper. Hearing me say so, he frowned. What is this? Betray a teammate? We weren't teammates from the very beginning. After a while, Sophocles organized his thoughts and stated his goal. Great Sovereign Cavendish is too dangerous. Sophocles began his story with such words. Just what exactly had Cavendish done for a Chaos main god who viewed destruction as a daily occurrence to say that it was dangerous? He's trying to break the barrier of the entire HE universe? It was not Sophocles who said it, but I said it in an affirmative tone. I believed that I already knew why Sophocles had come. Sophocles paused in surprise for a moment, but then he had an expression as if he expected that I already knew what was going on. Mortal, in my countless years, I've seen many outstanding geniuses. However, I've never seen anyone like you and your brother. Even Roland from back in the day wasn't as ridiculous as you. You've grown to such a degree in less than 400 years. As expected, any undying existence would love to start talking about the past whenever they started chatting. Even demons were no exception. A short 400 years. Do you know what I've experienced in the past 300 years? I chuckled and didn't respond, because I knew that he wouldn't care at all about what a mortal had experienced. My next topic was the main point of this demon who was skilled at scheming. Not long ago, Sophocles and Cavendish had allied together to plot against San Antonio. But now, he had immediately betrayed me. Naturally, he had obtained something. I'm not an immemorial demon who experienced the First Holy War. However, I once devoured an immemorial demon and learned from their memories just how powerful and frightening the invaders from other planes were. I don't want to meet such a powerful enemy like the ones in my memories. According to Sophocles' description, the immemorial invaders from other planes were powerful and frightening. They destroyed everything they went through, turning cities into ruins and the people into food. Wasn't this exactly the same as what demons did? It would seem that Sophocles didn't want any competitors to join his side. What he shouldn't have done the most is attempt to open up the entire dimensional barrier. Things like true evolution or surpassing the limits of the creator goddesses are fine with saying such beautiful things to the little demons of the new generation, but to say such nonsense to me, Sophocles started talking. He was filled with complaints and anger. Perhaps it was rare for a demon main god to have any sense of reason at all. Sophocles was having quite a difficult time among all his crazy and ridiculous companions. I wouldn't take his complaints seriously, but judging from the current situation, he was determined to kill Cavendish in order to eliminate the threat of the dimensional barrier being opened. Even a demon wanted to save the world? Wasn't this a bit wrong? Sophocles naturally thought of me in order to kill off the incredibly difficult and bottomless Cavendish. According to Sophocles, there was another chaos main god who had promised to kill off that maniac. As long as Sophocles found an opportunity to ambush Cavendish, it would be impossible for Cavendish to win. And now that Sophocles said this, it was doubtless that I already had the same status as a chaos main god in Sophocles' eyes. I wanted Sophocles' information support, but I didn't want to simply become his fighter, which was why I hesitated. Chapter 737. Cooperating with a demon would obviously be the same as asking a tiger for its skin. No matter what the plan was, and whether or not we succeeded in killing off Cavendish, we would definitely end up having a fierce battle against him. Still, it would be quite a pity if I refused to cooperate with Sophocles. Sophocles had accurate information on Cavendish, which was exactly what I needed the most right now. While I was hesitating, the next instant, a gigantic claw suddenly descended from the sky and attacked me. Unfortunately, Sophocles had only attacked Sophocles' shattered incarnation. Sophocles' true body hadn't even moved at all. Sophocles' true body hadn't moved at all. From the very start, we hadn't been talking about Sophocles' true body. I silently stood in the clouds and looked down at Sophocles, who was still sipping tea. It would seem that the time had come. This attack was only a signal. Some things didn't need to be said too clearly. No matter whether or not I agreed to join Sophocles' plan, I would need to display a certain amount of combat strength in order to have the right to speak. This was one of the rules of communication between the Chaos Lord. Since I had so sincerely stated my request first, Sophocles was currently testing out my personal power level after making my breakthrough to see if I had the right to speak on equal terms with him. However, if I appeared too weak or revealed an opening, Sophocles would happily kill me. Of course, it was the same the other way around as well. How could I possibly miss out on a chance to kill off this powerful demon before me? Actually, since Sophocles had blocked my path today, this battle was unavoidable. Ha, you won't be satisfied if you don't test my strength? Although this battle had turned from a life-and-death battle into a test, the danger level hadn't decreased at all. The moment I revealed an opening or an obvious difference in power level, it would instantly become a life-and-death battle again. Holy light gathered around me as I took a deep breath. I gripped my dawn holy sword with both hands and fully unfurled my angelic wings behind my back. For angels, wings weren't only for decoration or for flight. Their true purpose was to store and absorb even more power of order. From a certain standpoint, the number and quality of an angel's wings represented the upper limit of an angel's power of order. The more powerful an angel was, the stranger their wings would appear. 2 wings, 4 wings, 6 wings, 12 wings, metal wings, light wings, scorching wings, dragon knights, floating cannons. It seemed like all sorts of random things had been mixed in, but angels had all sorts of wings based on their rank and position. From a certain standpoint, this was indeed a type of functional organ. Their most basic ability was to absorb the power of order from the upper planes in order to replenish themselves and increase their combat strength. That was why their wings were always faintly glowing, and they were highly skilled in prolonged battles. I took a deep breath as I absorbed an endless amount of holy light from the upper planes. The entire world was bathed in golden light. Compared to the past, the gathering speed of holy light was at least 10 times faster. Previously, when I transformed into a war angel, it didn't change the essence of my life form. But now, my bloodline could give me actual power. War Angel was the name of my Order Angel bloodline. On the ancient tree of power ranks, this wasn't a regular type of ancient angel. Instead, it was an honorable title given to ancient angels by the creator goddesses in certain domains. Its name explained the characteristics of this type of angel. There was no other reason than that War Angel was skilled in combat. As the top-level warriors of the Order faction, War Angel's greatest reliance was their ability to use the power of order. What else could possibly increase their combat strength more than the endless power of order? From a certain standpoint, this pair of faintly glowing golden wings was also a top-level myth-ranked weapon that specialized in absorbing and increasing the power of order. I could even faintly sense that the entrance to the upper planes where I was absorbing the power of holy light was located at the core of the Heaven's Pillar, Pillar of Order. The Heaven's Pillar was equivalent to the river Styx, and was the source of all power of order. It was also the only river of light that existences outside of souls couldn't possibly come into contact with. It would seem that the goddess of order had cheated yet again to be able to absorb the purest power of order from the Heaven's Pillar of Order. The entire sky was illuminated by holy light. My wings had now transformed into grand wings of light that were comparable in length to battleship. However, I still didn't feel like I had reached my limit. Since I had the authority of a certain creator god, perhaps the amount of holy light I could absorb wouldn't be as much as a pure order god, but the quality of my holy light would likely be much higher. With a tremendous amount of holy light supporting me, my Dawn Holy Light Sword's blade of light was endlessly extended. This design was also what I relied on to slay large demons and undead. Second mode. The runes on the sword's hilt were ignited, and 5 small parts flew out from it. One flew high up into the sky at high speed, while the other 4 flew out in all directions and occupied the 4 corners of the sword. Meanwhile, I, who wielded my Dawn Holy Light Sword, was freely emitting holy light, becoming a true source of light. Endless amounts of holy light shot out. Every time it shot out, it would strengthen itself. This was a special domain created by the light mirror. The holy light became even hotter and more dangerous under the effects of the light mirror's amplification. The power of pure holy light was purifying and correcting this domain. The next instant, as a connection of light was established, I was no longer the only source of light. Above me and all around me, 5 other sources of light simultaneously lit up. The entire world was baptized by holy light. Even someone as powerful as Sophocles instantly became blind under this unprecedented baptism of holy light. The demons' gigantic and strong bodies gave them an even larger area of illumination. The continuous pure holy light would purify and weaken all non-order powers within this area. Perhaps it wouldn't be as domineering as the original holy light, But this continuous weakening effect would be even more effective when facing a powerful enemy. Powerful demons had the unique power of chaos distortion. They were able to instinctively transform their surroundings into the chaos abyss, turning it into their home turf. Meanwhile, my holy light domain was capable of erasing the traces of chaos without consuming any energy. Sophocles' gigantic body actually became his weakness. The high density of holy light in the air was currently dissolving his body like acid. Perhaps he wouldn't be able to threaten a chaos main god for a short period of time, but this continuous weakening effect would be endless. If only I had the complete version of my Northland's magic sword, ice magic sword, and 2 of my magic swords, I would be able to try and make Sophocles stay here forever. I didn't want to immediately reveal my trump cards, nor did I want to use my trump card when I wasn't confident in being able to kill Sophocles. But since my opponent was in existence like Sophocles, holding back would be the same as committing suicide. The spreading of holy light here was only the beginning. Even more holy light was gathering on my dawn sword. The concept of gathering light transformed my sword into a fatal needle of light. When the power of holy light was gathered to the extreme, my sword of light would have the power to slay a god. My sword of light had already extended to several hundred meters in length. However, I was still holding it tightly in my hand. It was just that I was now pointing my sword at the demon main god's core. Gather, gather, gather even more. Forbidden spells that spread out are meaningless against existences at the level of a chaos main god. Only the purest power of order, compressed to the extreme, will be able to pierce through their defenses and destroy their vitals, their demon hearts. Roar! The demon main god angrily roared at the sky as distorted power of chaos gushed out like a volcano. Black mist and lava covered his body in an attempt to resist the holy light's baptism. The demon main god held the greatsword on his back in his hand. However, it fused together with his flesh and blood. The great sword that was as large as a mountain was covered in a thick blood-red light. When the demon main god grasped his true power, the entire world seemed to tremble in fear. The demon main god took a deep breath as endless power of chaos surged out from beneath the ground. He had already connected himself to the chaos abyss at all costs. The entire land trembled and collapsed as everything returned to chaos. On the pitch-black land, the chaos main god became even more ferocious as his gigantic body expanded by another 30%. His greatsword was now powerful enough to slice apart any mountain. Finally, he moved. The demon main god swung his greatsword, which was even larger than his physical body, towards the sky. The demon main god's footsteps created an earthquake. The blood-red light caused his greatsword to suddenly extend. The blood-red light even pierced through the clouds. When I saw this sword, I knew that no matter what angle I tried to dodge, this sword would still collide with my lightsaber in the end. This seemed to be faintly related to karma. This demon main god, who was famed for being sly, was actually an incredibly outstanding sword saint. Sophocles had successfully connected himself to the chaos abyss. This sword attack would affect the power of chaos in the chaos abyss. Damn it, wasn't this supposed to be a test? Why are you trying so hard? It's not like I can kill you. At most, I'll make you go back to the chaos abyss and sleep for a few hundred years. Currently, Sophocles was also cursing inwardly. Wasn't this supposed to be a test? Why was he using a nuclear bomb as his trump card right from the start? He was using a powerful attack right from the start? What kind of test was this? Of course, Sophocles didn't know that Roland, who had just broken through to Chaos Abyss, only had this trump card that was specifically meant to deal with demons. This was a holy light nuclear bomb that he had prepared to deal with any main god. Both sides were worried that the demon main god would turn the test into an ultimate attack. The result was that the demon main god would be fighting at full power right from the get-go. Sophocles used a powerful attack right from the start, but the other side was still holding back. Was Sophocles just waiting to die? Sophocles regretted his rashness. His goal was only to test whether or not Roland had a trump card that could threaten a demon main god. Not only did Roland have a trump card that could threaten a demon main god, Roland even used it on himself. If Sophocles had known that this would be a fight to the death right from the start, he wouldn't have been foolish enough to die together with Roland. But right now, whoever stopped first would be giving the initiative to their opponent, which would be suicidal. Buzz buzz buzz. When the extended pure white sword of light clashed with the blood-red light, the entire world was filled with a buzzing sound. After a moment of silence, a giant gray pillar of light shot up into the sky. This was a gigantic pillar of light that extended endlessly. Even the airship that had left several hours ago could clearly see this pillar of light reaching into the sky. The next moment, the pillar of light continued to extend even higher, while an even more fatal shockwave began to spread. This shockwave would transform this wasteland into a completely uninhabited area. The power of order and chaos kept clashing and exploding. Even the creatures buried underground would be corroded and baptized. The shockwave kept spreading out as if it would never end. Even the airship that was several dozen kilometers away was barely surviving from the shockwave, becoming even more pitiful and damaged. They should be thankful. If they were still on the ground right now, they probably would have lost their lives already. Perhaps even a few decades later, this place would still be completely barren. Just like the holy wars of the past, this wasteland, which had once been the battlefield of main god-level powerhouses, would be recorded in history. It would be completely destroyed. Perhaps in a few years, strange new species would appear here, just like the ancient battlefields of the past. At the same time that the shockwave exploded, both sides had vanished without a trace. 20 minutes later, a charred black body landed on the deck of the airship. His entire body had been burned pitch black and fiery red. Chaos and order were still clashing on his physical body. Distorted blood-red mist was still corroding his charred physical body. Anything that got close to his body would either be directly corroded or set on fire. The nearby guards were astonished and hurriedly went to get water to extinguish the fire. However, someone discovered that the person who just landed seemed rather familiar. Isn't that His Highness Roland who just left? Why is he cooked? As expected of the undying Roland, he's still alive even after being cooked. Wow, he can even glare at people. Chapter 738. The strongest holy knight fiercely battled against Chaos main god Sophocles and successfully injured him. Sophocles has been driven out of the mortal plane. The fairies wouldn't miss such a shocking piece of information. One day later, all the newspapers and magazines had this piece of information on the headlines. Some accurate information stated that Sophocles had fallen into the chaos abyss with burns all over his body. His injuries were definitely serious, and it was likely that he would need to rest for several hundred years. This was doubtlessly a major victory for the Chaos faction. It was likely that the Chaos faction would be the first main god-level powerhouse to suffer such a heavy injury. This was especially so since all the other battlefields were in shambles. Such a victory was even more encouraging. Since the demon wave was unstoppable and the Chaos War God's unstoppable destruction was still fresh in everyone's memory, Sophocles' defeat was doubtlessly a major victory. At the very least, Sophocles proved that even a Chaos main god could be defeated, and defeated by a single individual. The entire world was praising this major victory while selectively ignoring the dark history of the strongest holy knight. It wasn't that no one doubted the veracity of this information. However, the nameless wastelands had now become a dangerous battlefield filled with dimensional cracks. The traces of power that defied common sense doubtlessly proved how fierce and real the battle had been. For a time, even more people had a favorable opinion of the Mist Alliance. After all, high-level combat strength would always be the foundation for comforting people. Perhaps he wouldn't be of much use on the battlefield, but at the very least, he wouldn't allow the enemy's powerful individuals to slaughter the Mist Alliance. In this aspect, the Northlands had always been at a disadvantage. Before the gods of the Hades had appeared, the Mist Alliance's top-level combat strength had indeed been far inferior to the Holy Light factions. But now this weakness had been made up for. The Holy Church was probably the most embarrassed to hear this news. This was not just illusory things like the comparison of strength and honor. Holy Knight was humanity's protector. This was probably common knowledge to everyone. Although this job was difficult, poorly paid, risky, and had a terrible working environment, the Holy Knight's reputation in the human world was top-notch. You could dislike the Holy Church and expel Holy Light believers, but you still had to maintain sufficient respect for a Holy Knight. Although the righteous, Holy Knights were strict to others and even stricter to themselves, they would always be able to inspire and unite people in times of danger. This was the same reason why people would usually hate the police, but when something horrible happened, they would lean towards them. There will always be someone who isn't stubborn and smelly. You don't like him, but you need him and trust him. From a certain standpoint, the title of the strongest Holy Knight was also the title of the strongest protector of human society. This title wasn't just an honor, it was also a duty. It had always been exclusive to the Holy Church. Being called the strongest wasn't just a kind of vanity that came from comparison. Instead, it meant that when he was here, you could peacefully enter your dreams, because no one could defeat him. No matter how dangerous the situation was, as long as the tree didn't arrive, everything would be at ease. This was the feeling that Estrada gave people when he was still in the Holy Church. The most righteous Holy Knight? The fairest Holy Knight? The oldest Holy Knight? There were many titles, but none of them were as reassuring as the strongest Holy Knight. The strongest individuals in other job classes would never be able to obtain such trust. This sort of reassuring effect was doubtlessly what the current chaotic world needed the most. After Estrada's death, several top-level Holy Knights tried to wear this title as publicity. Their power levels weren't weak at all, and they were indeed Estrada's disciples in terms of inheritance. However, they needed time and combat results to prove their abilities. But now they no longer needed to try proving their abilities. Being able to defeat a Chaos main god in a direct battle, or even just forcing him to retreat, was already something that far surpassed the comprehension of mortals. Even Estrada back in the day might not have been able to do this. The strongest Holy Knight Roland missed. Perhaps there had been people who doubted his claim to be the strongest Holy Knight back in San Antonio, as well as the fact that he claimed to have obtained the inheritance of the Guardian Hammer. But now all doubts had vanished. He, Roland Mist, had doubtlessly inherited the title of strongest Holy Knight. However, this wasn't necessarily a good thing for the Holy Church. That was because several months ago, this strongest Holy Knight had just killed the god of Holy Light's right-hand man, the Blazing Angel. Some things couldn't be made public. Roland and the Holy Church would forever be enemies rather than allies. When considering the Yonya era and the Mist Kingdom's messy affairs, no matter how nice the relationship between me and the Holy Church sounded, the most I could say was that we were on good terms. But behind the scenes, I really wanted nothing more than to kill the Holy Church. In that case, the Holy Church would probably be in the most awkward situation right now. The Holy War system that the Holy Church had worked so hard to create was no match for the Contract Heroes system that was driven by benefit. The Holy Light's legitimacy was being questioned, and even the Holy Light's guardian honor seemed to be getting further and further away from the Holy Church. Of course, I wasn't in the mood to think so much right now, nor did I know that the fairies were participating. The entire world was either astonished, cheering, or jumping for joy over this news. Damn Sophocles, he attacked me so heavily. From a certain standpoint, that passenger airship named Forward had helped me out greatly. If I had been lying in the wastelands covered in heavy injuries, I didn't know how much trouble that would have caused. I really had to thank my special trait of being unable to be detected. Otherwise, people would have found me long ago and turned me into dust. I need to recover from my injuries again. This time, it'll take several months. I fell into deep thought as I lay in the captain's cabin and gazed at the unfamiliar ceiling. Could it be that I had some sort of destiny with airships? I had to be hospitalized the moment I boarded. Fine, I was just making things up. My injuries this time seemed quite serious, but they were actually only some flesh wounds. After becoming a semi-god, one's physical body's recovery abilities would greatly increase. Normally, it would still take several months to recover. However, as someone who wielded the power of holy light, as long as they didn't injure their foundations, such as overexerting their mana or life force, all they had to do was cast a few rays of holy light on themselves. Ordinary people wouldn't be able to receive too much holy light healing in order to avoid overexerting their lifespan. This was basically meaningless for semi-gods, especially semi-gods who wielded the power of holy light. This was also the foundational reason why high-level holy knights were so disgusting to demons. Holy knights had thick skin and flesh, and any contact with them would even injure chaos creatures. They would even self-destruct at the slightest provocation if they were forced into a corner. Not only that, these holy knights had incredibly strong life force. As long as their heads didn't fall off, it would be very difficult for them to completely die. Anyone who encountered a holy knight would feel like a cockroach that wouldn't die. Also, since I wasn't seriously injured, how could Sophocles, who was far more powerful than I was, possibly return to the Chaos Abyss with such heavy injuries? Sophocles was currently acting in such a manner in order to disappear from the gods and Cavendish's sight. What a pity! I felt quite regretful. If I had an additional magic sword, perhaps I would have been able to defeat Sophocles. For example, if my ice magic sword had been fully formed, I would have been able to restrict Sophocles from fighting on the battlefield and bathe him in holy light along with the snow calamity. After Sophocles was continuously weakened, he would then be cleansed by the holy light for several hours or even several days before I focused my power on killing him. If my 7 deadly sins had been fully formed, a single backstab attack would likely have been able to seriously injure Sophocles' soul. Of course, if my inference was correct, my 7 deadly sins wouldn't be very effective against demons and undead. Now that I had leaked information about Sophocles, it would be quite impossible for me to ambush him again. But when I thought about it, I was fortunate that my other magic swords hadn't been fully formed yet, so I couldn't leak any more information. Most of what I had leaked was that I possessed a powerful myth-ranked weapon of holy light. My weapon's 2 abilities of spreading holy light and condensing holy light into a sword were likely to be known by others. If that was all there was to it, it would have been somewhat acceptable. It would seem that I'm still quite far off. The fact that I was able to fight against Sophocles to such a degree didn't mean that my power level was truly on par with the Chaos main gods. It was that I had chosen to naturally counter demons' powers from the very start. Holy Light's natural counter to demons and undead went without saying. It would deal at least 10 times the damage to demons and undead. This didn't mean that my power level was only 10% of Sophocles. There were many things that couldn't be calculated. For example, Longtu had killed so many dragons that rivers of blood flowed, becoming a demon legend among dragons. Even supreme immemorial dragons would avoid Longtu when they saw him. This didn't mean that Longtu's power level was enough to overwhelm Dragon City. He had simply chosen to counter Dragon Slayer's abilities. If he met a high-level demon, his performance would likely be even worse than an ordinary semi-god's. Killing power was only one part of Longtu's counter abilities. Not only that, it was the least effective part. Increasing hit rate against dragons, reducing the damage from dragon's spit attacks, immunity to draconic might, additional dragon scale penetration effects on my weapon, anti-poison effects on dragons, making it impossible for dragons to heal their wounds, the ability to fly, and seeing through weaknesses. All of these disgusting effects were far more effective than simply increasing Longtu's attack power. After all, attacks that didn't hit would mean nothing. Attacks that didn't break through Longtu's defense would mean nothing. Naturally, Longtu wouldn't receive any damage if he didn't live long enough. All of these abilities would instantly make Longtu the natural enemy of dragons. Every single one of his attacks would hit a vital point. He would ignore Longtu's spit attacks and claw attack. As long as his opponent bled, they would die. Even dragons that were far more powerful than Longtu would be instantly killed by Longtu. My Dawn Holy Light sword was also a specialized weapon against large demons and undead. My domain of pure holy light would continuously weaken my opponent, while my sword of light would continuously accumulate the power of order, becoming stronger and more difficult to defend against. In the end, my opponent, who was tortured to the extreme by being roasted, would have to face my fatal demon-slaying sword. Theoretically speaking, as long as I could maintain this attack for a long enough time, it should be able to kill any undead or demon. However, this actual combat had exposed the inadequacies of my newly born magic sword. My opponent isn't an idiot. He won't just obediently watch as you accumulate power while he's constantly being weakened. Sophocles had plenty of combat experience. He instantly understood the situation and unhesitatingly fought against my ultimate attack, not giving me any chance to accumulate power at all. If Sophocles had chosen to escape from my domain of holy light from the very beginning, I wouldn't have been able to stop him at all. At this moment, I really felt that there was a flaw in my ability. It would seem that I need to think of a way to quickly create a second magic sword to restrict Sophocles' movements. Otherwise, if I meet an opponent at this level again, I'll really— What are you doing, silly cat? I spat out the feather pillow in my mouth, as I angrily looked at the silly cat who was pretending to be innocent. Did she really think that I was a jinx? Was I really that clever? Did she think that a main god would appear just because I said so? Did she think that main gods were like cabbages that could be found anywhere? However, the ship's alarm suddenly started ringing, causing me to swallow my words. Chapter 739. The floating passenger ship Forward was manufactured in the Ottoman Suro shipyard. It was a 107-meter-long luxury passenger ship named Fortune. The ship had 2 third-class cabins, large public cabins, 90 second-class cabins, 3 person rooms, 50 first-class cabins, 2 person rooms/3 person rooms, and 20 VIP rooms, 10 two-person rooms and 10 single-person rooms. The ship had a theoretical capacity of 500 passengers, with an average capacity of 340 passengers. Unlike future large-scale passenger ships that had their own game rooms, dance halls, and swimming pools, the first generation of floating airships didn't have mature passenger technology. Most of the ship's cabins were just engine rooms and energy pools that were constantly operating. Even if there was extra space, considering the current harsh environment, some magic crystal cannons and aerial night would be installed. Although it had been 3.5 years since the airship was first constructed, and it had already made nearly 100 round-trip flights, the crew's attentive maintenance and powerful financial support made it look just like a new airship. Captain Knott had always been proud of being the pilot of this airship. He even privately referred to this airship as his most beloved daughter. But now, perhaps even his daughter's father wouldn't recognize this airship. The smooth, dark yellow deck was now covered in cracks. One of the airship's 4 engines had completely stopped working while emitting black smoke, while the other engine would stop and turn. The result was that the airship would frequently tilt, scaring the pilot to the point where he didn't dare to relax. After half of the airship's sails were burned away, they were directly abandoned. However, the empty flagpole wasn't alone, because it had already been broken. Even the uppermost VIP cabins had been completely destroyed. Fortunately, when the shock waves arrived, everyone had taken refuge in the large cabins, which was why no accidents had happened to the important guests. Right now, only the royalty, major nobles, and major merchants of the various countries could afford the Suckers VIP airship tickets. If several dozen of them died at once, perhaps even the ship's owner wouldn't be able to bear the consequences. The VIPs were quite reasonable. It was just that the vice captain, crew head, chief officer, and other high-ranking crew members' cabins had all been given up to the VIPs who were still in shock. The captain's cabin, which had the most luxurious decorations and the most complete facilities, it had already been taken up by the guest, who had hidden his identity and boarded the airship. Captain Knott had 20 years of experience as a smuggler. However, during the war against the Sea Tribe, he voluntarily joined the Ottoman Navy and piloted an armed cargo ship to attack the Sea Tribe's supply lines. He fought here and there for 3.5 years. Although his combat results weren't astonishing, he was still a qualified soldier. After Lady Storm died, the entire Ottoman Empire's Ottoman capital became clear. Knott also chose to retire. Later, the Ottoman government considered his past and recommended him to be the pilot airship's captain. At the very least, he had done quite well in the past few years. As a former Ottoman soldier, how could he not know about Roland? Without reinforcements from the Mist Alliance, the Ottoman capital would likely still be in a state of chaos. Roland's name was directly connected to Lady Storm's death. His disciples and subordinates had also participated in the battle to reclaim the entire capital. During that difficult battle, the Grey Elf Anti-Night Squadron was a powerful combat unit that rivaled an airship squadron. The addition of all sorts of new combat equipment solidified the Ottoman Empire's desire to ally with the Mist Alliance. Not only was the Ottoman Empire realistic, it was also how countries interacted with each other. Weak countries wouldn't have diplomatic relations, while strong countries wouldn't do anything and would have people follow them. This was nothing new at all. That was why the captain unhesitatingly protected Roland the moment he recognized him. That's right, he protected Roland. Roland's entire body had been burned to such an extent. Logically speaking, it seemed that Roland could die at any moment. It would be strange if anyone with ulterior motives didn't want to take action against such a good opportunity. This wasn't an unfounded worry. This airship had sailed from San Antonio's territory, and in San Antonio, Roland was the most wanted criminal for murdering Empress Maria. If there really was a San Antonio patriot on this airship who was willing to pay any price to take revenge for Empress Maria, then this would be the best opportunity. Unfortunately, the passengers witnessed Roland falling onto the deck. Naturally, the news of him being heavily injured was leaked, and it was too late for Knott to block this information even if he wanted to. In the end, Knott could only make some preparations in case of a rainy day. Knott's guess was correct. Rakage, who had been requested to guard the airship, managed to capture 2 hot-blooded youths with poison daggers that very night, but soon, Knott discovered that he had been overthinking things. In just a few hours, Prince Roland regained consciousness at a speed visible to the naked eye. He then complained about how he was bored with recuperating and wanted to have some fun to pass the time. Knott could only helplessly send out his first mate and several powerful guards to play cards with Roland to pass the time. In less than 2 hours, all of them were released. The reason? This injured Roland, the strongest holy knight, had actually won everyone's money in just half an hour. His miraculous gambling skills and his cheating skills made people wonder if he really was a holy knight who believed in abstinence and strict self-discipline. In the end, Roland said something, and Captain Knott no longer acted as a protector. There's no need to protect me. Even if I'm injured, anyone that can threaten me can ignore you all. Although this was rather discouraging, Knott actually heaved a sigh of relief. After all, if Roland died on the airship due to his own responsibility, nobody would be able to take responsibility for that. Fortunately, the second half of that night was rather peaceful. As dawn arrived on the second day, Holy Knight Roland's external injuries had all disappeared without a trace. In fact, He even started gambling with ordinary customers in the restaurant. Not had heard that powerful individuals all had many strange fetishes. For example, a certain powerful individual from the Mist Alliance married multiple princesses and started a harem even though she was a female. A certain emperor from another country would talk to a stone statue whenever he felt too stressed. It was even said that Not's own empress was tired of dressing up as a man, while the emperor had a fetish for dressing up as a woman. Of course, these were all rumors that had no truth to them. Not would usually just laugh at such rumors and not take them seriously. Sometimes, during long journeys, male sailors would be just as gossipy as the sailors. They loved to gossip about the powerful individuals. After all, the best way to improve the friendship of colleagues was probably to badmouth their superiors together. But now it would seem that such ridiculous rumors weren't completely baseless. At the very least, this prince from the Northlands was just as the rumors said. He definitely wasn't a proper, orthodox holy knight. Rumors said that he was extremely knowledgeable, but he never used his knowledge on the proper path. More than 30% of the gambling industry and pornographic magazines in the Northlands were under his control. His legendary super mercenary group, the Absolute Gentleman Alliance, was his tool for controlling the entire Northlands. Arms trading, mercenary trading, elven and beastman human trafficking. These were all things that ordinary people wouldn't even dare to imagine, yet he controlled them all. He was the throne in the shadows, the uncrowned king, the man who couldn't be offended in the Northlands, the last Mist Knight of the Northlands, and the ruler of the underground. He had a series of unofficial legendary titles. There was a saying that in the Northlands, you could offend any ruler of the Mist Alliance, but you definitely couldn't say a single bad word about Roland. Otherwise, no matter where you came from, you wouldn't be able to return alive. I really couldn't tell that he was such an amazing person. He's a holy knight who knows how to gamble in the underworld, and he's obviously cheating. It's unimaginable, and yet, nobody has ever questioned his character. However, compared to the legendary titles of the Holy Knight and the strongest villain, His Highness Roland seemed to be much easier to deal with. No matter if it was the former captain of an Ottoman warship or a smuggler who traveled all over the world, Not could be said to have seen many things. In his line of work, the most important thing was to be able to recognize people. Not had met countless people, but he had never met someone like Roland before. It wasn't that he hadn't met semi-god or myth-ranked individuals before. In his eyes, no matter which faction, all undying individuals had the same characteristic. They didn't treat ordinary people as humans. He would occasionally meet some undying individuals who cared about their reputation and would say nice things, but would always maintain a certain distance from ordinary people. It would be quite simple. When eating, food would be delivered to Roland's room. When bathing, he would want to have his own time and space. He would casually make a request, or even something as simple as adding spices to his food, which would cause his subordinates to run errands for him, and he would even think that it was only natural. It would be even worse if he had a noble status or an outstanding bloodline. He would be giving you face just by glancing at you. No matter how nice he said things, if you gave him coarse black bread for lunch, he would instantly turn hostile. Someone like Roland, who was clearly a top-level Beyonder, was actually fighting with ordinary people. No, he truly viewed himself as an ordinary person. He ate black bread, drank sour ale, gambled with drunkards, and even reneged on his debt if he lost. He was enjoying such a life, and he even pretended to be drunk to scam drunkards out of their money. Not had never seen a level 4 individual like Roland before. At the very least, he seems much more comfortable than those Beyonders. A cold wind blew past. A new dawn was slowly rising from the east. The night wind was the most hurtful in the period before the sun rose. Not carefully pulled up the collar of his coat to make himself more comfortable. Not relaxed a lot of his worries. All of this was just hearsay, and it didn't have much to do with him. No matter how he felt about Roland, it wouldn't affect his mission. All he needed to do was carry out his duty as a former soldier and escort his most important guest to his destination. After passing through this snowy mountain range, he would be able to see the outskirts of the Bardi Empire. With Bardi's Dragon Knight squadron patrolling the area, he wouldn't have to worry about his safety. Suddenly, Not noticed that a familiar figure had appeared on the deck of his ship. "Your Highness Roland? Why are you up so early? Your injuries haven't healed yet, and you need to rest more. Don't tell me that you're staying in the cabin." This person only glanced at Not, causing him to be unable to finish the rest of his sentence. This person had a similar appearance and was also smiling. However, the emotions contained within were completely different. Roland's smile was to express his kindness and happiness. He was communicating his emotions to others. Although this person was also smiling, he was enjoying his own happiness from the bottom of his heart. There was no one else in his eyes at all. Everything he said was an order that would definitely be carried out. "Oh, I heard that my older brother was here, so I came to greet him. Lead the way."